I have to say, it's wonderful to hear that music again. It's been a long time now. It's nearly 2 months since I last put out an episode, which was the Christmas award ceremony, the Golden Puddings, as they will be known from now on. And I just burnt myself out. I did 5 episodes in December, and there's a lot of work that goes into doing these, into organising them, into setting up for the interviews, doing the interviews, and then subsequently editing them into what you listen to on these podcasts. So 5 in a month was a lot of work, and I really, really did burn the candle at both ends. In fact, I didn't burn the candle at both ends. I set a flamethrower to it at both ends, so I needed a break. And but we're back, and I've got a fantastic lot of guests lined up already. I've got 4 already booked in. I know who the next 4 guests are after that, which is going to take me to around summertime already before I start looking at other people. And going to try a couple of different things. I am going to have an historian on who had a dabble in wargaming but doesn't do it regularly. I've got, fingers crossed, if I can make it happen, I've got an absolute legend of the hobby coming on that I'm really looking forward to. So keep your eyes out for that in a few weeks' time. And then in between that, there's going to be our usual mix of manufacturers and painters and rules authors and big gamers and you name it. They're all coming on. So, we're ready to go again. The wheels are started turning on the Yorkshire Gamer podcast machine, and we're here with episode number 39. I hope you're going to enjoy this one. This is with a chap called Martyn Kelly, and Martyn lives in the United States, and I try to get as many people as I can from around the world, and I've got a couple of absolutely superb episodes coming up later in the year from places that you wouldn't think of as wargaming hubs. So I'm looking forward to those. But back to Martyn, I spotted him on Facebook doing lots of big Italian Wars games, which immediately drew my eye at conventions in the US. So I thought, got to get this guy on. We can talk, obviously, about the Italian Wars. We can talk about conventions in the United States, how they differ from the UK, and of course, the difficulties of putting a big game on, not just for your mates, but for lots of members of the public who are coming to a show to play a game. And I have to say, I do find this quite funny. I have tried to get a lot of US people on this podcast, and never quite come off. I had a manufacturer who couldn't quite get the tech right. I've had quite a few manufacturers who just don't get back to me at all, and it's I want to have American people on talking about American games. So the first time I tried that, I got John Lander on. Of course, John is expat. We managed to get a real American on with Jason Weiser, bless him. And then I thought, great, I've got someone here, Martyn. He'll come on. Got in contact with him, and he said, "Yeah, no problem at all. Love to do the podcast. I'm from Solihull in the West Midlands in the UK, so um, we're going to America to talk to a Brit. So sorry, Americans, but if you don't answer your emails, you don't get back to me, you don't get on the show. It's as simple as that." Martyn puts on these great games, and I just want to say before we speak to Martyn that I think we should all give a little bit of praise to people like Martyn who put these big games on. Often they organise them, do all the painting, do all the terrain themselves. It's something that I do, and I just think that when you're playing those games at a convention or you're walking past them at a show, just have a think about how much work's gone into it and maybe say thank you to whoever's running it. I think that they would be extremely happy with that. I've had quite a few naysayers on the Facebooks recently, and I really don't think that is the majority of the hobby. In fact, I know it isn't. And just saying to somebody, you know what, mate, that's an awesome game, or that's an awesome set of figures, or that's just a brilliant effort to get that on the table, can make somebody's day. And it's a lot better than saying, your colours are wrong. Oh, you've put that machine gun upside down. So let's have some positivity in the hobby, please. And we're going to start with positivity with this interview with Martyn. So, couple of hours again, as usual. Sit back, get this in a cup of tea. Fat Rascal from Betty's, and job's a good one. So, without further ado, here's the interview. Oh, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the interview section of the Yorkshire Gamer podcast. And it's been a while. I've not done one since the 5 in December. So hopefully I can remember what I'm going to do. But if I don't, I'm sure my guest will help me out because I'm sure he's done loads of podcasts. So after my break, I was fully rested, and so was the Yorkshire Airlines pigeon. So it was time once more to go up and away to the USA. And my guest today is a proponent of the big games, and it's huge battles on huge tables with large numbers involved that this guy is all about. We all dream of those Polish winged hussars piling across 6 foot of teddy bear fur or a 196 figure pipe block. Yes, I did say 196, and this man knows how to get them on the table. His latest game, set in modern Afghanistan, looks amazing, and it's going to be another great addition to the great games my guest has put on conventions in the US. So let's delve into the world of Fall-In and Historicon and discuss what makes a big game at a show a great game and what the organisers of these games do before you sit down in front of them to play their game. Now, I have mentioned it before, and I have noticed a lot of teddy bear fur being used in my guest games, and we're going to check today that that's ethically sourced. So let's stretch our hand across the ocean in friendship and speak to the latest guest on the Yorkshire Gamer podcast and give a really big welcome to Martyn Kelly. Hello, Martyn.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. Very well. Is this your first podcast?
Yeah, it's the first one, so a little intimidated.
Oh, don't worry too much, mate. Don't worry too much. You've listened to a few of the Yorkshire Gamer ones in the past, so you've got an idea what's coming up.
Yeah, I've used them for the painting, sitting down for 2 or 3 hours. It's good to have in the background.
Yeah, it's a good background thing. I'm told by a number of people. So welcome on board. But before you get comfortable, Martyn, I don't want you relaxing too much. It's time for the 4 minute challenge, and that's what we do with all our guests when we get started. And that's just an opportunity for you to kind of summarise as for the audience your sort of introduction to the hobby up to where you are now, and the challenge is to try and get it in 4 minutes. So, have you done a bit of preparation?
I've done some preparation, but we'll see how it goes.
Oh, brilliant! Well, my normal timer and alarm thing aren't working, so I'll give you a wave on camera when you've got 30 seconds left, and then it'll just have to be me telling you to shut up rather than Dr. Regan. Okay.
Okay.
So, when you're ready, we shall start now.
Well, I grew up in Birmingham, England, near a place called Solihull. And as a young kid, I can't remember the age when I started, probably 6, 7, I got some Airfix Napoleonics and then started making the Airfix World War II tanks and infantry. And it was those days when you used Humbrol paints and a terrible brush. So if you were lucky to get pink near the face, and the biggest challenge was avoiding getting it on the carpet and getting into trouble. So that's where I started. Got the old famous books, the Bruce Quarry World War II and the Napoleonic Bruce Quarry.
Brilliant.
And that was the stock items. And then got into miniature wargaming. I think it was issue 1 in 1982 when I saw it at W.H. Smith's. And really just played with some friends from school. Then I had an uncle who lived at home with my nan and granddad, and he was in the ATC and did a lot of wargaming there. So when we used to go round to my nan's, He had a cupboard in the spare room where all his leftover stuff was, and we used to play with that. We obviously didn't play with his main stuff, but that got us into the modern micro armor. We were doing the 1985 Cold Wars, and we played a ton of that with the old Wargame Research Group rules, and then Challenger 2. So that's really what we got into. And then an extension of that, doing some modern naval with a rule set called Warship Commander, which was hugely complex, which has sort of, I've kept that interest and got into Harpoon 5 now. So not a pickup game. So one thing my uncle did was paint up for Christmas a couple of old guard battalions and some chasseurs cheval and an artillery battery. I think they were minifigs figures. So those were my first introduction to actually owning some metal figures, and his painting was way above mine. So we used to play on, I think it was a 4 foot by 5 foot green board that was just painted with some emulsion. So that's what we played on. When I went to university, really the hobby stopped for me. I was involved in playing rugby. Then after that, I moved around the world with business to university was at Bath. I was in London, Hull, Stalybridge, then to Italy, South Korea, and then across to Philadelphia. So it's not until my 50s that I really picked up the hobby again. And I got back in 2017. And my first figures I bought was, I was just amazed at the standard of figures these days. Some Calpe figures of Saxons, which lovely. Are truly beautiful figures. White on white is probably not the best introduction to get back into in the painting, but the paints had really improved as well. So I ended up putting the white on white aside for a bit, and then got some steel fist gendarmes, which again are beautiful figures, and got into that. Then really met some friends at Historicon, got back into that. Over a couple of years, I got 850 figures. Did the Battle of Garigliano at a club, was planning to do that for a Historicon. Then COVID broke out, plans changed, allowed me to do the Battle of Bikoka, which is, I think, 1,600 figures, and a Cossack project, the Kelminsky Uprising. So that's where I got back in. I'll leave it at there, and we'll probably delve into deeper stuff later.
Absolutely superb. Absolutely superb. Bang on time. I'm not suggesting that you've got a timer in front of you, but it was very good.
Yeah, I've got a timer, I've got to be honest.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's lovely. That's lovely to hear. And one of our previous guests, an old wargaming friend of mine, Stephen Barker, who was on a few episodes ago, he's very similar to yourself in that he'd had that immersion into war games fairly earlier on, and then university job, etc., kind of drifted away from it, and he's come back to it in recent years. So, what kind would you say? You mentioned a couple there, but what would you say the big changes are from when you stopped all those years ago to suddenly coming back into it?
There's some things that changed in hobby, and some things that obviously changed for me. I think financially, I'm actually able to afford some metal figures now.
Which, yeah, that's always a good one.
So, growing up with plastic, it was always the dream to have a few metal units. And when my uncle painted those couple of old guard battalions, they were like the pride of the collection. Not only just because they were very well painted for the time, but also because they were metal. So that's changed. The quality of the figures. I mean, I remember having a couple of minifigs figures. They were great at the time, but you do a Calpe sculpt or a steel fist sculpt, and the variation of the poses and that sort of realism. So that's changed. And really the paints. I mean, just I never want to see a Humbrol can of paints again. I use Vallejo now, and they're just a joy because you can put a coat of paint on, then it's dry, so you can put another tone over the top of it immediately, and then go on to a different color. You don't have to wait overnight for things to dry.
Yeah, I think you've kind of encapsulated there some of the major things that have gone on in the hobby over recent years, and those classic old units that we look at in the old magazines and old books, where every single figure is the same, apart from the drummer and the officer and the standard bearer,
Yeah.
and they're all on like an a green enamel base that's all the same, and there's no flocking and no terrain. Great games, and I love looking back at those periods. But some big changes that have gone on.
You could also get anything these days. Um,
Yeah,
uh, for example, the Afghanistan game I was doing now, I try and make it look as realistic as I can. And I go online and I call up some pictures of an Afghanistan town,
mm,
and I look at them and say, what haven't I got that's in this picture? A recent one is, those blue rain barrels that everyone
yeah,
has.
yeah.
Every house in Afghanistan's got them, and I thought I haven't got these, so I go on to Etsy or Shapeways, and someone's 3D printing blue rain barrels. I mean, it's amazing, and you've got them in 2 days. $6 for 12 rain barrels.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world, and I think there'll be many people listening to this who are shaking at the thought of going back to home roll paints. I've got a couple of. I've actually got a guy, James Loach, who lives fairly close to me, who runs the Olicania blog website. Very, very good Italian one as well, worth looking at if you've not seen his
Oh,
stuff.
his blog was one of the first I looked at when
Yeah,
I started
amazing,
back into it.
amazing collection, and a very clever thing. We diverse. We always divert on this podcast, but a very clever thing that James does is he has like a little cap with different flags on that go over the top of the gendarme lances, so he can change the nationality just by lifting the flags off.
Yeah,
And
I tried that.
yeah,
It's probably my skill, because you've got to remember, you guys have got 50 years of skill built up here. I'm on the fly with like the past 5 years and trying to catch up quick. But I could never get them to. They always spun around the flagpole and ended up in a place where I didn't want them. So
yeah, I
for my
think
Italian
James
wars,
has got some secret of doing it, and
uh,
it's very good, and it works. It works very very well. So where you're in the United States now? Whereabouts did you say you were?
I'm in Philadelphia.
And is it work that's taken you there?
Yeah, I move around the world with work. I moved with a big company and ended up here. And after that, I've since left them and started my own business over here.
Oh, brilliant! So it looks like a fairly permanent place for you now.
Yeah, you never say forever,
Never
but
say never. Never say
yeah,
never. I suppose once you get that, you get used to moving around the world. It's not such a major thing, is it? I mean, I've lived in this house for nearly 30 years now, and the thought of moving fills me with dread because I mean, the positives is that I'll find some of the figures that I thought I lost 20 years ago. Pack it; they'll be under a box somewhere. But
but
the thought of
then
moving out,
then you'll have to paint them.
yeah, I've got plenty of that going on at the moment. So you ended up in the USA with work, and how then? What was that spark that got you back into gaming?
Well, one of the things I started with a few years before was just the model trains, and that's changed a
Mm,
lot with the
yeah,
control systems. And I wired up something with the signals changing as the train passes over and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed the weathering of
mm,
the trains,
yeah,
and putting graffiti on the side and doing all that. And then I think one day I just looked online at some of the figures,
mm,
as you do, you're just browsing something and saw them, so ordered a few. Then saw there was a convention and went to that, and that's where
mm,
it started. Went to Historicon, got chatting to some people. They invited me to the local club. Of course, you turn up with no figures because
yeah.
you've got nothing, and that's where it started, and that was in 2017.
Yeah. So are you still involved with the railway modelling? It's something it's something I've not done, but it does fascinate me.
Not recently. I'm in a townhouse in the city, and there's limited space,
Yeah,
so it's um, and also I would like to get back to weathering a few more rail cars and stuff like that
yeah,
side of it. But ever since I got back in the hobby, I've got into the side of the hobby where I'm doing games at the convention. And then I'm always spreadsheeting out how many units I've got to paint and
yeah.
how much time I've got. And it's invariably you spreadsheet it out up until a week before the convention, and
Yeah.
I'm I still order stuff like a couple of weeks before just to add to the table. So
Oh, yeah.
it's not been able to fit anything else in.
No worries. Well, the to me, the railway modelers are the very, very skilled. A lot of the stuff that you see online is really, really good. I think they're a little bit ahead of us in terms of tech with things like the sound chips that they've got in the engines and what have you. But one thing that does absolutely amaze me with it is that the figures that they have are just dreadful.
Yeah, the
Compared to a war games figure and the painting and the style. If anybody, any of the listeners remember the old Subbuteo table football game, you used to get like 10 blokes or fans you'd stick in the terraces, and they were dreadful as well. And it doesn't seem to have improved at all.
well, there's a business there for someone because I think it's a reasonably large hobby.
It is.
So,
It's huge. It's
and
huge.
you don't need that many figures to have a good range.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked most of my working life up in the Yorkshire Dales, and there's not that many people around. And in the middle of one of the villages called Belbusk up above Skipton is a place called Metcalfe Models, who make loads of really detailed card and models for different scale railways. And they're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
There's nobody near them at all. But they pumping this stuff out, and somebody's buying it. It's
Oh yeah.
amazing. I might try some painting. I might try and paint in some railway engine drivers or something and see if they sell. See if they might go like hotcakes, and I'll be retiring very soon.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's retiring on this sort of hobby.
Very true, very true. So what's your gaming experience at the moment? Then do you have a club? Do you game at home? What do you do?
I don't have the room to game at
Mm.
home. We live in a row house, so it's like 14 foot wide. So you limit. It's long but wide, so you can't really
Yeah.
fit much table space in there. So everything I do is really at the club or at the
Mm.
convention, and there we've got as many tables as we need there.
Yeah. So what's the club that you go to, and how's that set out, so organised?
It's a There's various groups that turn up at a local church. It's a
All
sort of
right.
very disorganized, but it just seems to work. So
Yeah.
there's several individual groups that affiliate with each other,
Right.
and we just go along there. Um, Typically, you put your game in on the list about a month before, and then people just turn up and join in whatever game they want. So there's normally about 6 games in the morning and 6 games in the afternoon.
Right. So it's so I suppose that's like a mini convention every other week then, is it?
It's not. We do it once a month, so it's not
Once a
that
month.
frequent. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's sort of similar to a mini convention, but a little more informal.
And do you have any, I suppose they're called hobby stores in the US? Do you have any local gaming stores nearby that have tables to use if you need them?
There are a lot of people do go to those. They tend to be more on the fantasy side of things,
Yeah.
or the big games like Team Yankee or Flames of War. Um, that side of things. I used to go. They did something on a Thursday evening, but to carry out a load of figures just for that an evening just
Mm.
doesn't work for me. So I've really concentrated on the once a month event, and I typically try and put on a game there every third one. So once a quarter, I try and put something on.
Right. And the rest of the time then would your group of friends, it would be like, oh, it's your term next week, and no, or
Yeah,
next month, and you'll do another one, and then I'll do that one.
yeah, it's more people stepping up and saying, "Oh, I've got something this time. I'll do it," rather than being told. That's the
Ah,
way.
there's no,
Yeah,
there's no, as we say in the UK, bullying, which is
no,
like volunteered but being bullied into volunteering.
there's less of that. People just it's. I think people don't want to do it every time, but they do
Yeah,
want to do it periodically.
yeah. So looking through your social media and stuff, you're on Facebook. Do you do anything else like Twitter or Instagram or anything like
I really don't like Facebook that much,
that?
but there's a lot of hobby stuff on there, so I'm sort of drawn to that.
Yeah.
Twitter, I've never really got into. I do have a blog post,
All right.
which
Yeah. Yeah.
amazes me, continuously amazes me. I'm going to plug it shamelessly.
Yeah, no, we're all
Uh,
shameless plugging on this show.
it's a blog post called collegeofkings.com,
Yeah.
which is College of Kings was what Napoleon set up as after he took apart the Holy Roman Empire. Uh, what I do on that is it's really started it more for me to remind me of what I'd done. If I put on a battle, I put up the order of battle there. I took photos of the game, and I continually refer back. So it was never really intended for a wide audience, but I've had a couple of very positive experiences. I had a guy at a convention. The Italian Wars battle, the Battle of they call it Novara. It wasn't actually at Novara. It's a place called Ariotta.
Yeah.
Um, I did my whole explanation, and a guy was putting this on at the convention, and I've never seen it done right. And I walked up to him and said, "This game looks very similar to the way I put it on." And he goes, "Yeah, I found some guy on the internet, and it turned out he'd read my blog and copied my game."
Oh,
And
that's fantastic.
And then I had another guy, he'd saw that I put on the Battle of Garigliano, and
Mm,
he sent me an email, says, I want to do that at a convention.
yeah.
Can I phone you up and chat to you about it? And I thought, it's amazing that people are reading this stuff.
Well, I think those certainly the blogs are a great source of information, aren't they? I mean, you said you were inspired by James's Olicania lad blog, and people are coming to your blog. Can you type in Battle of whatever? And if you've done a post on it, then it's going to come up, and people can come in and have a look at it. It's quite a sharing hobby. People seem to be quite happy to give and receive information without wanting 50 quid for it or whatever.
Yeah, I don't want any money for anything. But yeah, it just surprised me. I mean, you see some of these blogs, like James's blog, over 1 million views. Mine's
Yeah.
like a minute thing compared to that. I got to 20,000 the other day, so I felt quite
Whee!
chuffed about that. So
Get down to College of Kings, everyone. Let's get it to 50,000. I think to be fair, older blogs. I'm just coming up to 1 million hits on mine recently, and I think older blogs have gone through a phase where the Russian intelligence services appear to be quite interested in them for a while. I got a lot of hits from Russia and Ukraine before the current situation over there. So I think I'm not sure. I've had 1 million hits, but how many of those are real people, or how many of them are Dmitry checking I'm not intending to invade the Baltic states
yeah,
in my lunch hour?
well,
I'm
I
not
might get
sure.
a couple of those because I did a couple of battles from the Khmelnytsky uprising,
Yep.
which was in 1651, and that's on current day Ukrainian territory. So there's very few blog posts on
Ah,
the war in Bilozersk
yeah.
and the Berestechko. So you search for that, you're not going to see very much other than my stuff.
Ah, all right. Well, I'm not suggesting to anyone who's listening or to yourself, Martin, to do a post on the fictitious invasion in Belarus 2024, but I can guarantee you'll get a lot of hits from Russia if you do.
Yeah,
So
stay away from that.
stay away from that big time, big time. It just reminds me, actually, when you were something you said a few moments ago, the Holy Roman Empire. I always remember my history teacher saying it wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, and it wasn't a bloody empire either. I don't know how they had upset him, but Mr. Whittington, if you're still around, mate, you were the best history teacher ever. I really inspired me all those years ago.
Well, they did go around causing a lot of trouble to a lot of people, so I guess it must have crossed
Yeah,
his path somewhere.
yeah, he wasn't impressed with them, bless him. So we'll talk quite a lot about Italian wars in the final section, and about some of your other games as well. But if you had a go-to period, would it be Italian wars, or what would it be?
That's one thing with putting on games at convention. You sometimes see people they develop a good game and it's
Mm,
fine and people enjoy it and they
mm,
take it along to convention after convention, which is absolutely fine. They've got people who love playing that, and people know what they're getting into when they sign up for that. I just don't. For me, I personally don't want to be the person who lives off one game forever or one period forever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I did do the Italian Wars for the convention, which we'll talk about.
Hmm.
I don't want the next game that I take to be the Italian Wars, so I like to
Okay,
spread it around.
that's an interesting and valid point to make, because I know at one of the shows I go to there was some guys who've got a lovely collection of World War One sort of desert Palestine stuff, and the first time you see it, it's like it's an amazing, and then you go back the next year and it's the same stuff, but everything moved around the table in a different order. And then you go
Yeah.
back the next year and it's in a different order. So I can very much see your point there. And we'll talk very much about how UK and US conventions differ later on in the day. But if you, is there anything that drags you, a book or anything to a particular period in history?
No, I mean, the Italian Wars, I got into it because I saw some beautiful figures.
Yeah, there
It
are
was as
no
simple as that.
unbeautiful figures for that period.
And the colours and the flags. So I don't really want to go to something like the War of the Roses, which was a very similar
Yeah,
period. So
yeah.
I moved then to the Khmelnytsky Uprising, which is only 100 years, 120 years later, but it's a completely different look
Yeah.
of figures, the more drab Cossack figures, and a completely different style of fighting where you've got more of the muskets, but a lot of it was mounted troops because of
Mm.
the vast different distances between. So it's not as colourful.
Yeah.
So I just wanted something different, so I drifted into that. Um, I'm now looking at things like the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451. Um, again, because of just vast armies, huge Hun armies and Romans and Ostrogoths and Visigoths. Um, I've bought a Seleucid pipe block um,
Nice.
just because I want to paint that up and see how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Because I could then get a massive row of pikes and again completely different tactics. So I don't want to just repeat. I want something different each time.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. That's a really refreshing approach to those big games.
The problem is it means you have
It's
to keep painting figures.
well, yeah. Well, I can't say anything on that, can I?
No,
Because I never
worse
stop.
than me.
So yeah, I don't just talk about big games. I actually just do them. And that's my style as well. So we'll draw into the end of the first section, and at the end of this section, the bit that everyone goes through is the Venn diagram of wargaming, and I haven't done this for a bit, so I'll have to look down at my notes and make sure I get the right bits. So just breaking down your personal take on wargaming, really, and I break it down into wargamer, painter, collector, and historian, just to see how they fit together, or maybe not at all, for you in the hobby. Which bits interest you the most?
Yeah, I would say that everything I do is to put on a game.
Right. Yeah.
So I wouldn't go and research a bit of history if I wasn't putting on a game in that period.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and I wouldn't paint figures just to have them sitting on a shelf, and I wouldn't collect them just to collect them. So it's all, do I enjoy the history? Do I enjoy the painting and the collecting? Absolutely, and it's all part of it. But it's
Yeah.
all to put on a end product. That's sort of.
So that game is the big circle, and then where everything else is overlapping it is to get that game on the table.
Yeah, and I don't want to be as historically accurate as I can. I'm not a historian. I'm not going to go
Yeah.
into museums and get original documents. So
Mm.
um, I do go to historical societies and get information. It's like when I'm putting on different battles for the Italian wars. There was a question on this on one of the, the Facebook groups. Which flags do you have for the Swiss? I
Yeah.
wanted to know which cantons are at which battle. and in
Yeah.
which pipe block they are. Now, then you could argue, someone could come along and say, well, the helmets on your Swiss are wrong. Yeah, I didn't research that quite as much, but there's little bits that interest me, and I research those and try and put them into the game. Now, am I always historically accurate with everything? Absolutely not. I don't think any of us can be.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think it's very difficult as well to, I mean, I think I'm fairly well off in terms of resources that I can put into the game. You know, I'm mid 50s. I'm close to retirement. I've paid for my house and my car, and my kids have finished university, so I've got disposable income. But even I will have one lot of Swiss, and that lot of Swiss will fight 1494 5 in Villanova and 1520 odd in at Pavia.
yeah.
I'm not buying two different lots of Swiss just to please Dave on the internet who goes, Your helmets are wrong, mate."
And also, I've got 350 Swiss. I'm not
Yeah,
painting another 350.
exactly. We're shouting from the same hymn sheet here, I think, mate. So when you do start research, then into a new period, like the to say my anything other than Yorkshire Leeds language. Did you say Kaminsky? Is that anywhere near?
Kelmanitsky, and I hope I'm saying it right. I've probably
Yeah,
butchered that name.
yeah, no, I butcher it every time I do a video or anything. So when you're getting into that particular period, then is it books, internet? Where are you going for your research?
Yeah, well. I'm going to the internet for research initially,
Yeah,
just to get a feel. But then I'll want some books that really study the individual battle. When I did the Battle of Riva, I bought probably three books. One of them was Italian. The Battle of Navarra, again, well, I'll probably talk about the book later, but it's an Italian book. And with Google Translate on your phone these days, you can just point your phone at the book and go Italian to English, and you see it on your phone. Not perfect translation, but it opens up a whole other. And there was a battle on the Kelmanitsky Uprising, a battle called Bilazerksa, which is a smaller battle.
Hmm.
Actually, small, it's a huge number of troops, but not as well known, perhaps I should say.
Yeah,
Um, I found one book in Polish, and I actually went onto Polish websites to try and buy this, and I couldn't negotiate buying it. It was like $5 to buy from Poland, but you couldn't
yeah.
negotiate your way through. So I actually ended up going with the public enemy number one, Amazon, and paying $40 just to get the book.
Wow.
So, and then I spent 6 months with Google Translate on that book, because there's no other information in English
Hmm.
around on that. So yeah, I search high and low for information, but I like to try and get the battle. Well, I like to understand the battle and
Hmm.
then try and represent it on the table. Which, when you're doing square tables and this battle's over many kilometers, you can't always do, but at least you've got a basis for your representation.
Yeah. So do you enjoy almost the challenge then of researching things that aren't, easy to do? If you wanted to do Pavia, you
Yeah,
can get 25, 30 books in English.
yeah.
Whereas, some of the lesser known battles, you struggle. I found this particularly with the Garibaldi stuff I've done recently. And very little information in the English language. So do you enjoy that challenge then of digging into stuff?
Yeah, I sometimes find with a lot of the English books that they propagate false assumptions that when you research the battle, everyone says this and everyone's done it this way, therefore it must be.
Yeah.
As wargamers, we often believe what some guy's written on the internet in 5 minutes, and
Mm,
so I like to go back a little bit more. Not obviously not to original source text, but perhaps to the historical society of the town where the battle's in, or the museums there, and look on their web pages, or a book written by someone in that country.
yeah.
You can get a very different perspective, and that also helps you eliminate the national bias a little bit if you've got both sides of the argument.
Yeah,
So
I mean, there's national bias, there's regional bias. Not that I have regional bias on this show, obviously. looks slightly worried. Um, but yeah, so it's that challenge of putting it all together. And do you deliberately pick obscure stuff, or where does it come from? I got to do that, or do you see a figure or a picture, or what brings it to your
No, I mean,
mind?
as I mentioned, I've got limited experience in the hobby, so I don't
Yeah,
want to come across any different. Um, uh, like for the Italian Wars, I write down. I've got a list of the major battles in the Italian Wars, and the first one I did was Garigliano because I just thought that was a pretty cool battle with them coming round the side, crossing the river upstream. So I decided to do that, then research that. Then really started looking at which troops I'd got from Garigliano and which
that you
was the
can use
next
elsewhere.
closest battle
Yeah.
that I only had to paint X number of troops to get to and then move to the next one. So that I ended up at Bicocca and then to Ravenna. And obviously, everyone's looking now at what can we do in 2025, and there's going to be a few battles of Pavia there.
Yeah, we've ours is already organised or being organised at the Royal Armouries Museum in Leeds, just down the road from us. Has got a big Pavia display with life-size models of pikemen and a gendarme charging into the pikemen. So we're going to have a table in front of there, which I
And
think
don't
is
they
going
have
to
that
be.
really famous picture there as well of the
Yeah,
Battle of Pavia?
yeah. It just happens to be on odd. What's it doing in Leeds? I've got no idea. We probably stole it sometime. Probably Leeds United away match at Juventus or something like that. We probably stole it from a museum somewhere.
There's going to be a bit of healthy competition to see who can put on the biggest game there.
Oh, definitely, and I'll win, obviously. Uh,
We'll see.
Brilliant. So, thanks very much for that, Martin. That's a lovely little introduction there, and we'll just pause the episode for a second, and we'll be back shortly to talk about big games. Welcome back, everyone. And as you all know, part two is the big game chat. And the first question, Martin, for all my guests, everyone gets the same one, is what does a big game mean to you? If I say big game, what does it conjure in your mind?
For me, it's 28 millimeter figures. Other people do big games in different stuff. For me, it's 28 millimeter figures, or even 40 millimeter figures. I've seen some beautiful 40s.
Ooh,
I've actually
ooh.
bought a few,
Yeah,
but that's for the
that,
future.
that's a
So
different level. Is 40 mil a
yeah,
different level?
um, I don't think I like the bigger ones. I think they're 56. They look a bit toy soldierish, but that's just for me. And then I'm looking at 1,000, 850, 1,000 figures, sort
Mm,
of minimum to get into that big game category. Now,
yeah,
I do deviate out of that, like my Afghanistan project, which is less figures. There's probably only a couple of hundred figures there, most of them civilians. But I've then tried to go more bigger on the terrain, even though it's
yeah,
only a 4 foot by 8 foot table. But also, it's the size of the table. Um, I'm typically running a game on a 5 foot by 21 foot table if I'm doing a big game or bigger.
yeah.
Um, so that's sort of what I put on as a big game and what I think of as a big game.
Brilliant. Do you think time period affects of the game that you're playing can affect how that definition is looked at? Because you're talking about Afghanistan, and like you say, it's kind of small squad tactics over a big area.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that, but I've seen World War II done with on the divisional level and front level. With there's a friend of mine who he must put 500, 600 tanks on the table.
Yes, that's what we like
So
to hear. That's what
and
we like
plays
to
that
hear.
through. So yeah, it does affect it, but only to a
Mm,
certain period. Once you get into after the 7 Years' War, maybe it affects it, but before that, I mean, a big game's a big game. You can.
it is, yeah. And what's the thing that appeals to you about that? Then you've got this big table, lots of figures. What's the appeal of that compared to something smaller but highly detailed?
I think it's there's no reason you can't go detailed on a big game.
Mm.
I think it's the look and the feel of everything, and trying to almost create a scene. I've seen some big games done where it's just a green cloth and a lot of figures, and that doesn't really capture the scene for me.
Yeah.
I think it's all about the picture. That's what I'm trying to create.
And do you remember um, the time that your brain kind of switched to the big games? Was it in your previous wargaming life? Do you think that's where it comes from, or has something triggered it since you've come back to the hobby?
Well, you remember seeing War Games Illustrated and
Oh
the big
yes.
games there.
Hmm.
That was so out of reach when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, and you can't afford 5 metal figures. So there's always that there that you wished you could have that. And
Hmm.
coming back, I don't think there's anything that particularly inspired me. I just like the look of a big battalion or a big pipe block, and you can't just have one. You've got to have several, so it just morphs into a big game.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear. And so you weren't put off then by the kind of 'cause, there is no easy way to do a big game at the end of the day. There's a lot of time involved. There's a financial aspect with buying lots and lots of figures. Did you not did you not at any stage think, "Cool, it's gonna be a bit easier. I'm gonna do bolt action with 30 figures."
Yeah, or a skirmish, a couple of pirates, and a Wild West. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now I've played in those games and had a great time, so I don't want to put those down.
yeah,
But no, I mean, I just decide what project I'm doing and then spreadsheet it out. I list every unit. I list how many I've got to do by such a time, and and really get down to it. And
yeah.
you know, I'm not. I think also people are put off by big games because they think, well, I can't do the terrain, I can't
Mm,
do the scene, I can't do my painting of the figures isn't high enough quality. I mean,
mm.
you look on the internet, and if you were comparing yourself to other people, you'd never do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think there was a Francesco Tau who does some
Oh yes,
Napoleonics.
yeah, yeah.
I, I, I couldn't even dream to do that. But when you put on a big game, you don't need to be worried by that. People,
Mm,
my 196 figure pipe block, no one looked at each individual figure to see how good or bad it was painted.
yeah.
They looked at the effect. Now, I try and do my best on each, but my standard is not this sort of level that some people
Mm,
can do. And so you don't want to be intimidated. You just need to get down and start.
yeah. And know that there's a. I'm sounding all um, modern and everything now, but there's a journey to go on. There's a journey, and you need to you know how far you've got to get with stuff to get to that big battle level.
It's also been a little bit crazy
Yeah.
because one of your guests was on, and he was doing the battle of. He wrote the book on the Battle of Leipzig, and I think you commented
Yes,
how many
Rohan. Yeah.
battalions there are. And I'm starting with a Saxon. I'm doing one division, which I've already in my mind is going to be 2 divisions.
Yeah.
And you said, well, it's almost impossible to do every battalion, and then it started me thinking, well, is it?
Ah, that's what I
Um,
like. I like a challenge,
yeah,
and
I'm not sure
everybody.
I'm going to go that route, but
Yeah.
you've got to be crazy enough to think about that.
Yeah, I think it is a mindset. I think it is a mindset, and it's just a different. No way is right or wrong. It's just a different way that uh, our minds look at something like that. Whereas I see, um, the army list or order of battle for a big battle as a challenge to cut everything off, rather than something that I'm afraid of that I can't do. So, right, you buggers, I'm going to beat you. I'm
Yeah,
going to beat you.
and I think by spreadsheeting it out, I think I do end
Mm.
projects. I get to a point where I'm
Yeah,
done, and that's great. A great feeling.
yeah, and a pirate skirmish would be really small on a spreadsheet,
It's a
wouldn't
weekend
it? Pirate one, pirate two,
treasure
the end.
chest.
Treasure chest. Yeah. Oh, now you're putting some detail in, Martin. You're going too far. You're going too far. So, what's if you think back on your gaming Is there any games that you've played in that not necessarily you've organised? Is there anything that you've turned up and played in that's kind of wow, that was a great
Um,
good game?
I've been around some games that I want to get in. There's a guy
Mm.
over here. I'm probably going to butcher his last name. A guy called Jeff Wazaleski, and he does some weird games. He did Italian Wars, but Leonardo da Vinci's machines, and it's
Okay,
more a
yeah,
role
yeah.
playing type game. And he did another one in the Cossack period. He's doing the American War of Independence versus zombies or something. He does some weird stuff, but he's an actor and he dresses up in costume, and
Oh wow,
everyone has a lot of fun. It's not the sort of thing I could pull off, but he's got the personality
yeah.
to do that, and everything looks fantastic on his tables. Um, so
I've never thought of a showman kind of style to it, but yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
good
he's
idea.
just fantastic, and he's got to be the right personality to pull that off. But
Yeah.
yeah, um, it's. I think really my limited time back in the hobby, I've been more concentrating
Mm.
on putting stuff on myself. Yeah, so you go to these big conventions, there's only so much time, and actually, one of
Yeah.
the things that I haven't done, and it sounds surprising, we're more participation games over here. I haven't actually played in a game with my Italian Wars troops.
Oh no,
I
you've had to
well, I'm
watch.
the GMing it and running it, so I do want to do that sometime this year.
Oh, no, we definitely need to get that off the ground for you, definitely. Um, so do you think, or why do you think then that, and they have, without a shadow of a doubt, bigger games have kind of gone out of fashion a little bit, and there's a lot of new players are coming from different areas to wargaming and maybe not used to those bigger battles that maybe we were when we were younger. Do you think that's a barrier to new people getting into the
Yeah,
bigger
I
games?
think a lot of people you find a really flavor of the month. A lot of these Kickstarters
Yeah,
where it's a box of this and a box of that, and it's only $100 for this, and um,
yeah,
there's a lot of that, and then you just find that people put them on the shelves and move on to the next Kickstarter. I think the big
yeah.
games you can't afford to flip from thing to thing. You've got to work through a project. So I think all that Kickstarter thing has changed some of that.
It certainly has. It certainly has with a lot of the smaller games, hasn't it? Where something comes in and there's a big fanfare on it, and box set for this, and then it comes out and you never
Yeah,
see
and
it again.
personally, I'm not. For me, box sets don't work. I like to go and pick and choose figures from different ranges. I want to get a couple
Yeah.
of different rule sets, see what I like, make
Mm.
modifications, do some terrain. I don't want everything in a box. Yeah, it's a shame. I just don't see many people doing really big games.
We'll put an end to that. We'll put amazingly when I first started this podcast 2 years ago now. I was kind of at the point where I was thinking, does anybody do this anymore? And then the listening figures have just gone up and 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 up. And there are a lot of people out there who do it. Maybe it's not getting as noticed as it should be in the War Games press, which is a real
Do you
shame.
think, as a result of that, people have started big projects and we're just not seeing them come to fruition yet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, and quite a few. But I'm in contact with a lot of people who involved in big projects or want to start big projects. And it kind of leads on nicely to my next question. And they're asking me for advice. So if someone came to you, they came up to you all breathless at a show and said, "Oh, Marty, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. I want to do this. How do I do it?" What would kind of your kind of points of advice be? Kind of highlights that you go,
Well, I think I've really touched on two of them. Is
mm,
don't let your own limitations stop you doing it. Don't be intimidated, both in terms of the work and painting standard. I mean, we all improve in
mm,
painting, but you've just got to accept that I'm not an artist. I'm a hobbyist. There
yeah,
are true artists out there. You don't have to be them to put on a good looking game.
mm,
And then the other side of thing is don't go to an organization list that someone's published. Research the battle. decide what you're going to produce, then have a plan. I'm going to do this unit, then this unit, then this unit, and just get started. I've found that one of the things that keep me going is just when you've done a unit, take a picture on your phone and take it to the club to show people you're making progress.
Yeah.
And it's almost then you've got to show them something new next time.
Yeah. It's that sense of achievement, isn't it? I remember when I first started, I had a Philip J. Haythornway Uniforms of Waterloo book, and in the back there was an order of battle for Waterloo. And then every time I painted a unit, I was doing 15 mil back those when I was a teenager. I'd put a line under it, and that sense of achievement as you worked your way down the order of battle, putting a line under
Yeah.
each one that you did.
And you can also plan to, like I did, start with a smaller battle and then move on to a next one, which is slightly bigger battle. So you're actually using stuff as you go.
Yeah, good sound advice. I mean, lots of people with this. I don't know if you've seen my 1/700 scale World War II
Difficult to miss it.
project. Yeah, it's rather big. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? You won't be able to play I don't care. I love it. It's brilliant. It looks ace. I want to enjoy it. Just let me get on with
We're
it.
crazy. Leave us to it.
Remember that guy that you used to leave in the corner of the room and just talking to himself? Well, that's us. Just leave us there. We're fine. Don't worry about
We'll
it.
contact you when we need players.
Exactly, yeah. And then you'll all volunteer then, won't you? There's something ready for us to play. We'll come and volunteer now. Well, thanks very much for that, Martyn. We're going to cover big games quite a lot in the fourth part of the show. So we'll take another very quick break and we'll be back for our world famous quiz. Well, we've had a number of weeks without doing this quiz, so that's reduced the number of complaints that have come into the Yorkshire Gamer email. Once again, add a disclaimer that the Yorkshire Gamer quiz is not about how good a gamer you are. It's about how Yorkshire Gamer you are. And a low score could be positive. Doesn't make it right, but it could be positive. So, nice and straightforward, Martyn. I think you've heard this before. It's a yes or no question, or there's one answer or another. And with me being in Yorkshire, it's all very black and white. There's no umming and ahhing around questions. Are you happy with the rules?
Yeah, hopefully I won't generate too many emails for you.
Oh, excellent. We love a good email. We love a good email on this show. So, first question. I think I know the answer to this one. Go big or go home?
That's an easy starter. Go big.
Go big. Excellent. Contrast paints, are they great or are they a gimmick?
I would say in general, they're a gimmick. I've seen a few people do some really good stuff with them, but the majority of them I just don't like. But I'm actually, and you probably know this, I'm getting back into the hobby and everything's new to me.
Yeah.
I found a new way of painting faces, which is new for me, where I paint them white and then do earthshade wash. So you do your wash first, but then use the contrast paint flesh. I think it's Guillemot flesh, and just highlight the nose and the cheeks and anywhere the wash hasn't settled, and it's revolutionized my face painting. So I would say in general a gimmick, but painting faces, I'm a little convert on that.
Specialized use here and there.
I'm not using it as a contrast.
A tool in the box.
Yeah. So gimmick though as general.
Lovely. Not sure how this will translate in the US, but you're choosing a paintbrush and you go all Reek Posh, Windsor and Newton or Yorkshire Made Pro Art.
Well, I actually used neither, but I'm with a previous guest on this, Henry Hyde. I listened to him over Christmas. Rosemary & Co.
Yes, down the road. The road.
So I use those all the time. Great brushes. So does that keep me in the Yorkshire side of the ledger?
I'll give you half a point. Now, this is an interesting one for you. 96 figures. Is that an army or a unit of pike?
Well, for my Battle of Bicocca, I had a number of 36-figure pike blocks, but I had 240-figure Swiss and 200-figure Landsknechts. And then for the Battle of Ravenna, I went for 196 figures.
Awesome.
So Yeah, it's definitely a pipe block,
Definitely a pipe
a
block.
small one.
This, yeah, there's new rules come out, and I won't say them because I got in trouble when I did. But very very small pipe blocks don't look right at all. But 196, 200 odd plus, that's what I'm talking about. Because
Yeah,
I think was it Ravenna or Bayakoka where 9,500 in one of the blocks?
yeah, that was my. There's about 9,500 people in the pipe block, so I did that on a 50-to-1 scale. I think it's what's that, 16 by 16,
Yeah.
196 figures. I've not seen a larger pipe block out there in 28mm, but I would love it if someone posted a bigger one on
There's a
your.
challenge, folks. There's a
Yeah,
challenge. I've seen Simon Miller's successor pipe blocks. They're huge. I think the 64 figure units,
yeah,
and then that's kind of spread out down a 15-foot table. So I'd love to know how many figures in that, but I don't think as a single unit I've seen more than 196. I think
yeah. But there's
that's
definitely a challenge out there to someone.
top effort from the boy. That's 28 mil as well. None of these baby scales. Right, next. 6x4. Is that a big game or a small game?
I would say generally a small game.
Excellent. You're going to organise a game. Are you going for a points based or historical order of battle?
I I detest points.
Excellent. Another points hater. Excellent. That's what we like to see. You're doing your painting. Do you use a wet palette or an old bit of MDF to mix your paints?
This is another one. It's I get a Chinese container. I put
Yep.
down some polyroll, wet it,
Yep.
and then put a piece of what do you call it, greaseproof paper on top, and it's great. Wet palette for the first day. Your paint stale. Then my thing dries out, and I'm ended
Yep.
up just using a piece of greaseproof paper exactly the same as an MDF. So 90% of my painting starts off as a wet palette but ends up as just a sheet of
Brilliant.
MDF essentially. So good in theory, but just doesn't work.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a swing in this. When I started this, wet palettes were the thing, and now I see a lot of people. My mate Chris Breeze, who was on the first ever episode, and he's done a couple of others since. He's stopped using his wet palette now,
Yeah.
so the truth is out there.
But a wet palette, if you're going to use one, don't pay for one. Just make your own. It's so cheap.
Yeah, you see them that are like 14, 15 quid or something. It's like, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
Like
I
you
got
say,
a Chinese container.
You use the Chinese takeaway container. Even if you're paying for your greaseproof paper, it's like tuppence or 10 cents, a quarter. See, I know all my American monies.
Yeah.
Excellent. You're doing very well so far. You're doing very well. So, let's see how badly it goes from now on. Undercounting figures. Are you going to go black or white?
Again, 95% of my stuff is black.
Yep.
But painting my Saxons in their white uniform, it just doesn't work for that. Yeah. So there's very discrete things that I will use. For white uniforms, I will use. I don't even use a white primer. I use a light grey primer. But black is my preferred. And the Vallejo black, I don't spray it on. I actually brush it on the brush on primer. Yeah. Great product. Love it.
So this is the next question is the reason why I can never live in America. And that's Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee.
Okay, I'm gonna sit a little on the fence on this. I much prefer tea. Yeah. However,
American tea.
If I'm in Italy, going into a coffee bar for breakfast, I'll have a cappuccino, or after a meal in the evening, I'll have a little espresso with a grappa. So in the right place, a coffee is good, but for general drinking, tea.
Yeah, even I will drink coffee in Italy because it's a national pastime, isn't it? It's just they really take care about it. So I suppose in America then it's going to be Lipton's iced tea and all that stuff.
I can't drink iced tea. Can't be done with that. It's horrible stuff. I've got some. I don't know where PG Tips is from. Is that from the other side?
Yeah, that it's PG Tips is an English company. Obviously, it's Indian tea, but. It's not too bad. It's a reasonable brew.
Is that a Lancashire one or a Yorkshire one? PG. It might be
PG.
across
No,
the
I think
hills.
it's down south somewhere. I don't think it's from the Yorkshire tea belt.
Yeah, well, I can get that over here, so that's what I would drink. When I was in the UK, it was normally Tetley's or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, steady away, steady away. Question 10. War games units, if it's historically accurate, do you like them tightly packed or socially distanced?
Tightly packed. When I was doing the Cossack uprising, a lot of the Cossacks travelled in masses, so there's a little bit more spacing there. So, with the proviso about historically accurate, generally very, very tightly packed.
Excellent. You don't like pipe blocks with 20 figure space between each figure?
It's not a pipe block; it's a gallery.
Yeah, it just drives me mad. Just drives me mad.
20 millimeters a figure. That's what I do.
Exactly.
The problem is with that, and I bound all my figures individually, which really helps with the flags. I do different flagmen, so I can substitute them in and
swap them in and out. Good idea.
With the pikes going all sorts of directions, on that 196 figure pike block, I bought it from 200 figures to combine them, trying to fit them all in so the pikes wouldn't impede the guy in front. It took me like 3 hours to arrange them.
I bet it did. Top tip from me about big pike blocks and arranging figures is to offset the ranks. So put your first rank down, and then your second rank, put each man slightly to the right, so that their pike fits through the gap between the two guys in front.
Yep.
And then I go from my personal preference is lowered to upright over about 6 or 7 ranks. So as you're going backwards, those gaps between the figures enable you to fit each of the pike in.
Yeah, I do something similar with it going back, and the front row, I'm everything on an individual 20 millimeter base, but the front row I tend to route to the left of the base, and the next row to the right of the base.
Excellent. We're on the same wavelength there, mate. We are certainly. Question 11. Would you like a 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
The weekend monster game.
Excellent. Another one that I'm not sure how it will translate to the US of A, but avocado. Is it just posh, mushy peas?
Avocado, if I'm in Mexico eating street food, a nice bit of guacamole is good. So I'd say there's a place for avocado, but that place is not with egg on toast.
Excellent.
Yeah, put a bit of bacon and black pudding. That's what you want there on a bacon sarnie.
Yeah. I just don't understand it. Sorry, Nick Skinner. Don't understand it, mate.
Now I do like peas, but I'm not a huge fan of mushy, so you're probably going to knock some points off on that. But definitely avocado only in its place.
Excellent. There is a place for avocado, and it's out of that window over there. Anyway, so. Next up is the universal question, Martyn. So there's a bit of a pressure on you here. Come 39 episodes, everyone's answered the same so far, and that's round dice. Are they allowed or banned on your table?
Well, I might shock you here. No, I'm not. I actually love the engineering concept where they've got like an octahedron in the middle. Engineeringly, they're a marvel, but nowhere near my table.
Excellent. That's what we like to see. 100% still. Let's see if we can get to 50 episodes with everyone answering the same. You down the chippy? Do you have haddock or cod?
Well, you cannot get good fish and chips in the US. So at this point, I would take absolutely either of them.
Anything. I'll take anything.
Now, if I was in the UK, I don't go down the chippy that often. But when I go back and not having eaten it, I'm eating it twice in 2 weeks. So given the choice, I would take haddock, but I would take absolutely anything right now.
Awesome. We had fish and chips last night. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Jealous.
Do you come back to the UK much at all?
Probably once or twice a year.
Have you still got family over here?
Yeah, still got family.
So, question 15. Do you like a good table and a set of rules, like a casualty table, or are you 6 and you're dead kind of dice roll?
Well, I love games like Harpoon 5 and Warship Commander with the tables.
You mentioned that earlier on,
I would not dream of taking complex rules with tables to a convention. I think you want, when you're doing a participation game with 14 players that you don't know, I need to move away from that. So that's not the game I would play myself, but it's the game I that works in the
Yeah.
convention setting. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like a good table for myself.
Awesome. 28 mil is king, yes or no?
I think we touched on this. Yeah, with the although we'll give a shout out to the 40s as well.
Yeah, excellent. 28 mil or bigger is king. There we go. There's a few emails coming from that statement. What always amazes me is that people have listened for nearly an hour to get to this point to complain. Have a think about that, everyone out there. But there we go. So, question 17: unpainted miniatures allowed on the table? Yes or no?
There's no excuse for that. Just paint them.
Excellent. Um, you did spend some time in the UK, so you will have a knowledge of football or soccer, as it's said.
Don't tie me in with this.
No, it's like, what? Anyway, I mean, how is American football? Football, you only kick it about 4 times in the game.
And they're taking oxygen after 30 seconds on the field, or yeah.
Well, anyway, let's not generate sports related complaints.
Well, the Eagles
teams,
were at the Super Bowl last week, so
well, I do like American football, and I've followed Dallas Cowboys since the days of Danny White as a quarterback. So that's going back a long, long way.
That won't get you any favors in Philadelphia, like in the
No,
Cowboys.
it won't do. I'll be drummed out of the street, tarred and feather, won't I? So, back to the question: Bradford City or Leeds United? I am wearing a Bradford City top, by the way, just in case.
Well, as you probably noticed by my top, I'm really a rugby fan. It's a Bath rugby fan. So
rugby.
Yeah, so I can't claim to be a huge football fan, although I did follow Birmingham City when I was young. And
right, excellent.
Pub trivia question: who was the first $1 million transfer in English soccer?
Was it Trevor Francis?
It was Trevor Francis to Brian Clough and Nottingham Forest.
Brilliant. So, yes, I remember those days very well. Very well.
Last time Birmingham was great. So
it's improved massively, actually. I went to a concert in Birmingham a couple of years ago, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much better it was since I went there in the 80s and stuff to shows and what have you.
Oh, the whole Canal District, they've done a fantastic job with.
Yeah.
The whole city centre, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in Leeds, really. The calls in Leeds used to be the area where that you would find prostitutes and dead bodies, and it's now the place for the nouveau rich to have a canal side apartment, and great, amazing thing to change. So is that area of Birmingham gone that way as well?
Yeah, from what I've seen, I don't go all over, but the centre certainly seems to be much, much better.
Yeah, it used to be a good spot to go for like old shopping trolleys in the canal and bikes and German bombs from World War II, that sort of thing. But they've seemed to have dredged it, and all that's gone away now.
Well, last time I was there, I even sat on Black Sabbath Bridge.
Whoa! Awesome.
I don't think I actually answered your question for it, Leeds or Bradford. I guess supporting Birmingham, I'm more the underdog, so it's probably going to be Bradford. If I have to choose.
That's what we like to hear. Question 19: Yorkshire or the other place over the hill that we don't mention on this podcast?
Well, I've worked in Yorkshire, if you count Humberside.
Wow, yeah. East Riding.
I've worked over in Staley Bridge.
Is that Cheshire Staley Bridge, or is it in
Cheshire Staley Bridge near Glossop, that sort of area?
It's nice around there.
My story about going over there. I'd moved from Hull with my job to Staley Bridge, and I went down the pub after 2 weeks, and I just got chatting to this guy while we were watching the Formula One on the TV, and I said, "I've been here 2 weeks, and it's rained every single day." He said, "Don't worry, I've been here 2 months and it's rained every single day." So,
sounds about right. About right.
So yeah, I mean, I like both places, but the Yorkshire Moors, I love that.
It's a really nice, and I'm so lucky to have worked there most of my adult life. It's if you get fed up, you're not far away from an amazing view to cheer yourself up. So definitely a good place. So final question. Games Workshop, are they the work of the devil?
Yes, they are, and I will tell you why. And it's not for the reason most people think.
Yeah.
It's their Citadel paint range.
Mm.
And they charge a fortune for this contrast flesh color,
Yeah.
which is fine. I'm all for that, make some money. But don't put it in a pot that you got to lift the lid and falls over at the first time and spills half my pot of paint. They do it on purpose, I swear. They
Yeah.
do it on
It's a
purpose. So
marketing move then.
yeah, I mean, Vallejo, you could knock the bottle over, you're not going to lose a drop. So,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm on my horse here.
Oh, it's great. I love a rant. I love a rant.
Yeah, Citadel paint and that paint pot was designed to spill so you would buy more. And that's why they are the work of the devil.
I have to say that it's never happened to me, but I'm very, very sparingly used GW paints.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'll come, there's a really dark, Ivan Dark Sun or something like that it's called. It's a really deep, very heavily opaque yellow.
Right.
And I use it as a base for yellow because it covers black, because I always undercoat black, apart from horses. So they occasionally get a really, really good paint in the range, but I don't use much of their stuff. And I've seen these paint.
You'll spill more than you use
Yeah,
at some point in time. It's going to happen to you.
I've seen all these pictures all over the internet with people losing the GW paints, and it's never happened to me yet. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, they do it on
But I,
purpose, though. I swear they do. You're probably going to get lawsuits from Games Workshop now, but
yeah, well, I've had this question in for ages, and I'm amazed I haven't had somebody come. You can't do that. So and what another thing that annoys me about GW is how they they bring a paint out that everyone relies on. Like it was Devlan Mud, which was like the a wash, and then it changed to Agrax Earthshade, and then they just suddenly overnight go, "We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do this."
yeah, you can't do that.
That's dreadful, dreadful. I use that Devlan Mud for years and years and years, and then suddenly it just went, not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And luckily I'd got a bit of a stash going, but all that's been used now, so I'm on to other methods of washing.
You can rely on Vallejo, Sepia Wash, and Umber Wash.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going
exactly.
anywhere.
There's stuff out there that still works, which is brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. You've done extremely well. You've got 90%, which is pretty good. Pretty damn good. You are definitely in the upper quartile. So very impressed with that. Very well indeed. So we're moving on now in the features section. We've got a few bits and more to go on this. And this is room 101. So George Orwell's Room of Horror turned into a TV show in the UK, and the guests there would try and convince the host that a pet hate of theirs should be consigned into the room and banished forever. So this is your chance, Martyn, to get rid of something that you and it's just a pet hate. Don't worry about offending people. That really drives you nuts. So the door to the vault is opening behind me as we speak. So what is your chosen entrant into room 101?
Oh, so many things, so many things.
You know, when I've said this before on the podcast, but I'll say it again. When I first started doing this, I thought this is going to last like 6 weeks, and then everyone's going to come on and go, I can't think of one. You've got points, and I can't think of one. But just people go, oh, I've got loads, Ken. Can I do 12? No, you can do one.
Well, one of your guests, Chris Flowers, really helped me out because unpainted flag edges. If I brought that to room 101 and you'd not allowed me to put it in, I would have felt I'd done a disservice to the wargaming community. So he really saved me and has allowed me to go off piste on the rest. So I would say the one thing that annoys me, and this is strange coming from a big gamer, is overcrowded tables.
Oh, nice.
You know that game where you've got a line of figures against another line of figures and no option other than to go forward or not to go forward. And that is it. That's no tactics, no nothing. Add another table on each end and open it up and have some room to maneuver on the flanks and do some tactics. Yeah, overcrowded tables.
That is an awesome one. I like that. Because I think and I'll get in trouble with Ancients players now, but I think Ancients are the biggest culprits of it
Yeah.
from my knowledge of looking at tables. Um, massive big units on a huge and nothing
But
else.
I've got a book on, is it Antiochus, the
Mm,
Seleucid commander, and his tactics, and looking at that, and a lot of stuff happened on the flanks, and
yeah,
there was movement and to and fro, and I understand the centre was tightly packed, and that's fine, but
yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's
excellent. Well, that it amazes me how people bring these up every time. I know there's people out there who are itching to get on just for something in Room 101. So yours is in there, mate. That's an absolutely fantastic one. The vault is closing behind me, and yeah, I like a lot of figures on a table, but I also like to get a sense of a battle. And there are going to be areas where there are less troops. There's going to be areas where terrain determines the number of troops that can get into that particular area, and it's not all one giant mass of men.
Well, I had the Battle of Ravenna. You know, you've got the defences and the cavalry on either side, the heavies on
Mm,
really the left, and the light cavalry on the right hand side. I
mm,
had one guy at convention, a young guy, I think he was like 22. He
yeah.
took command of the light cavalry, which are not particularly impressive. And he had so much room to move. He was charging, retreating, counter charging. The guy couldn't take a smile off his face all day.
Oh,
And he
brilliant.
just, other people would have said, I've got the light cavalry, it doesn't matter.
Mm,
He was having his battle and he just
brilliant.
loved it. And that was
Excellent.
made my convention.
I love to hear that. That is absolutely fantastic. And then the final section of our little features section is the Desert Island Wargame. And being expat, you'll know all about Desert Island discs
Yeah.
on Radio 4 now. Um, so, what would your Desert Island game be? What would be the one game that cost, space, figures, all of that? Nothing's an issue. What is the game that you would want to take to your desert island?
I just love the Italian War, and I think there's so much you can do with that.
Yeah.
And it's my first big project, so it's got something there for me. Um, the other the other little one that's tying with that
Mm.
is a project I want to do, and it's because it takes me back to when I started in the hobby. It's just a really huge modern micro armor project.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I've got this image in my mind of two 6 foot by 24 foot tables with Soviet division with the entire Soviet tank regiment with the entire divisional bridging assets,
Oh, the whole
um,
lot.
helicopters, everything, just trying to cross a river that's 2 foot wide on the table, just
Awesome.
massive. And I've just bought 300 buildings
Oh,
to start this
fantastic.
project.
Start with mad project. Do you
Yeah,
remember do you remember a game called Core Commander
yeah. I
from
bought the
Tabletop
book.
Games? Yeah.
Yeah,
Because they had the thing I loved about that was that they had all the engineering stuff was in there, and they had rules for it, and it just covered absolutely everything rather than your typical tank infantryman hiding in a ditch kind of game.
yeah. And I think you've got to have the room. You've got to have the big
Yeah,
rivers. You've got to have the space. So you don't want an entire Team Yankee get a lawsuit over this one. That drives me nuts. It's like a parking lot.
yeah,
You've got 20 tanks inside a 1 foot area, and they always end up 6 inches away from the opposition. You know,
yeah.
these guys are
Strange.
killing each other 3 kilometers.
One of the things that got me into a massive amount of trouble a couple of years ago was because we've toyed with Team Yankee here, and we've actually rewritten them to make them a lot better and increase the ranges, etc., and make them into a more traditional set of war games units. But my way of stopping the tank park method was I've got this giant sledgehammer that's about 3 foot wide. So I put a picture on Facebook of two tanks with the sledgehammer between them, and just kind of went Yorkshire gamers trademark York. Team Yankee tank spacing device.
Oh,
Oh
brilliant.
my word! Oh, some people got very upset.
Some people are
Oh,
tied to this Team Yankee. They love it.
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Crazy. But there we go. There we go. So, along with your desert island game, you get to take, other than a religious book of your choice, you get to take a book. So, what would you choose book wise?
Well, I was sort of thinking about this, and I a man, the Art of War in the 16th Century.
Yeah,
It's a good book. There's a lot of things wrong in there that he doesn't get
yeah,
right, accepting that. But I've already read the Italian Wars section, and there's
yeah,
other parts that I haven't read that he's very easy to read. So I do
yeah.
like that book, but I'm going to be a little bit more indulgent. It's not a big book, but it's probably the best book I've ever bought um, for wargaming. It's in Italian. It's the Ultima Battaglia di Medievo, the Battle of Ariotta, um,
Wow, look at that!
by
Awesome.
a guy called Mario Truzzo. So I've got Mario Trozzo. I've got no relation to him, but I will plug it because it's a great book. It's just so well written. It's in Italian,
Yeah,
so I can brush up on my Italian while I'm on the
well
island.
done, well done.
But it's so well written. It's researched really well. The drawings are really good. They do maps and a 3D topical of the battlefield. And it's the only book that's ever described that battle anywhere near what it actually was.
Oh, that's awesome. Who's the publisher on that one, then, mate? You could just
Um,
make it
I
easy
have
to look
no
up.
idea. But it's called the Ultima Battaglia de Medievo, La Battaglia dell'Ariotta, Navarra, 6th of June, 1513. And a
Awesome.
guy called Mario Trozzo.
Okay,
And
yeah.
you
I'm
just
looking.
search
I mean,
it.
obviously we can't. The listeners can't see it, but it's like a hard cover, no, rather than a
It's
hard back. It's
Yeah, it's a
and it
glossy cover, but
yeah, and
it's really well put together book, physically put together well as
yeah,
well.
it looks like an osprey on steroids.
Oh, don't even put this in the same category.
It's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger, and probably twice the size of the campaign series books. Looking at it through the
Yeah,
camera.
it's
Excellent. Well, I have to say I haven't got that book, so I shall keep an eye out for that.
it's probably one of those books that he's sold four of them to his family and friends, and now there's going to be
Yeah,
a rush on them. So
yeah. But those Charles Oman books are really good. And like you say, they're a bit dated now, but they read so well.
yeah,
And I've read the kind of the late medieval one as well, which kind of leads up to the
oh
Italian
cool.
Wars, and that's really good to get in your mindset how um, sorry, Bill Hooks, but how it changes, how warfare changes from that late medieval to early Renaissance period, and it's well worth a read.
Oh, I'll
Well
have to
worth
put
a
that on
read.
my book buying list.
There's a green one and a blue one.
Yeah,
Um, so yes, definitely, definitely. And finally, in this section, you get to choose a war games unit to take to the desert island, and that can be one of your own. It can be one that particularly means something to you from a magazine or from anywhere. Well, I'm not suggesting you steal it, obviously, um, but what would be your war games unit that you would take?
I would say it would be one of the units of the old guard that my uncle painted for me because that
Mm,
was such a step up when he gave it me for Christmas and it
yeah,
meant so much at the time. I think it was minifigs. Well, that were they 20 millimeter, so it's going to go with
yeah.
nothing I've got now. Um, but that would probably be the unit. I don't want anyone else's units because they wouldn't go with my style of painting. They may be
Yeah,
better painted, but I want a consistency across my table.
sure.
So,
Are they still around? Have you still got them? Or
I've
do
still
you know?
got them.
Oh, brilliant! That's
They're in the
fantastic.
basement. Yeah, I've still got
Oh,
them.
I was worried that there might be some horrible story about losing them in a move or something like that. But that's fantastic to hear that you're still with them because um, you can have those iconic units. Like the Irish Brigade from the Peninsular War that was featured in so many of the War Games Illustrated magazines back in the day, that you'd love to own. But then it doesn't have that. This is my unit.
Yeah.
the first unit you ever painted, or like that one, the one that you were gifted to, and brings back memories of a family member. You just can't take that away from that, can you?
Yeah, and I don't see me ever using it for two reasons on
Mm.
the table. One, I'm never going to get 20 millimeters to go with it. And, and secondly, my style of armies is I am very reluctantly put any guard units in. I would
Yeah,
much rather play with the conscripts and the other stuff. You know, it's not all about I've got to have that unit to help me win. I'm more of a let's get the mass of the army.
absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. We'll take another short break for the audience, and we shall be back shortly for our big topic. Excellent. So we come on to our big topic, and this is big gaming in the USA. So, Martin, you've kind of come back to the hobby and carved yourself quite a big niche here, and going and taking some pretty spectacular games to shows in the US. It's been covered elsewhere before, but I thought we'd start off by just really getting you to describe what a typical US convention is like compared to a UK convention.
Yeah, well, I can't really compare because when I was in the hobby in the UK, I was really too
Yeah.
young to go to conventions. So the only real knowledge of UK conventions is what I see on the internet. Perhaps I can more sort of concentrate on describing what goes on
Yeah, sure.
at a US convention. Here on the east coast of the US, there's conventions run by the Historical Miniature Gaming Society, HMGS. And they typically have, and it's all been upset by COVID, but we're sort of getting out of that now, three conventions a year. The one in the spring, which is coming up in 2 weeks' time, is called Cold Wars. The one in the summer is Cold Wars is typically it starts Thursday night and goes through to Sunday morning. Historicon is the big one in the summer,
Yep.
and that's an extra day. And then Fall
Oof.
In is the one in the autumn, or the fall as it's called. Um, so typically, there's two types of people: the ones that go for the entire convention, where you actually stop at a hotel on site,
Mm.
and then other day trippers. That they have essentially three parts to the convention. They have a dealer hall, which is open not the Thursday night, but Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, or Thursday, and there's normally about 50 vendors and some
Yeah,
big
that's good.
ones.
Yeah.
Old Glory are there. So a lot of money is spent there, and that attracts the day trippers.
Yeah.
One thing that's never appealed to me, but seems to there's a fanatical following, is something called the flea market. People pay for a table and exhibit their wares and sell the stuff they don't want, and one man's trash is another man's trash,
Mm.
So um,
Yeah, I think it's known as a bring and well, it used to be like a generic one that was called a bring and buy, where it would be run by lots of people, or we've started to probably come to your method now, or the American method now, where somebody will hire a table for 2 hours and sell their stuff, and then once that's done, that person will go, and then somebody else will come to that table. Is that how it works there?
yeah, it's typically longer. You typically hire the table for the morning or the
Right.
afternoon. So
Yeah.
um, that's what I don't tend to go down there very often because I know
Mm.
what I want and I've got it. But I did go down there just as they were packing up on the Sunday last time. And everyone's trying to get rid of anything they haven't sold. And I found, don't know whether you know Sash and Saber, the 40 millimeter
Yes,
guys.
yeah, I've heard of those. Yeah.
I got some French 40 millimeter. I wanted some Russian 40 millimeter, and I picked up $250 worth of stuff for $20.
Wow.
And the only reason I hadn't bought them is I was expecting Sash and Saber to be at the convention, and they weren't. Otherwise, I would have bought them at the full
Wow, that's a good
price.
saving. That is a
So
good saving.
that's my only time I've bought anything at the flea market. So there's that, and then what I think we're more interested in is the third triad, which
Mm,
is the gaming.
Yeah.
And typically, convention fees, it's ridiculously low. It's like $35 to get into the convention for the whole period or something like that. If you put on a game that's 16 player hours, that's number of people times the number of hours. So 4 people times four for a 4 hour game, you get in for free, which,
Right.
that means something to someone. But when you've spent X amount of dollars paying for a big game, it really doesn't
Yeah.
count for very much, but it's a nice gesture. And these participation games, anyone can sign up to go into any game. And so a lot of games are for 4 or 6 people. I've tended to put on games for 12 or 14 people.
Yeah.
Um, and people sign up, people who've either have played the rules before and love them, or you get people who want to try out the rules or try out the period and know nothing about it. So you get a wide range of people coming, and typically games are for 4 hours at a time. You can go longer, but that's typically what people want. So some people will come and play 6 or 7 games over a convention.
Very, very, very different to how we go here. You kind of touched on pricing there, and so it, you pay. So if you let's say I just want to come along for the day and wander around the trade hall, is that what would that cost me?
I don't, for the entire convention, it's not very much. It's $35, $40.
Yeah.
I
So
think
for a day, you're
it
probably
might
worth
be
getting
20,
them.
might be $20. I don't know, but it's not a ridiculous amount. But if you're bringing a what's called a non-playing spouse or partner, they get a free ticket.
Oh, brilliant,
So
brilliant.
I've often, when I go to a convention, I don't really want my girlfriend around me all the time, but take her, a couple hours in the morning. I'll walk the convention, show her all the tables. She'll see my setup, and then she'll go and do whatever she wants to do. But it's nice that you can take your partners in and show them what's going on, and there's no
Yeah,
charge for that.
yeah, that's very good. And the choice of games, is that on a first come first served basis, or do you as an organizer, and we'll talk more about the actual organizations of the game in a little bit, but do you pick your players or do they pick you, or how does it work?
There's a sign up. Registration is just open for Cold Wars.
Yeah.
And there's a list of games, and you can sign up for them. So I'm doing my game. It's Modern Afghanistan. Quite a complex set of rules, so it's a much smaller game. I'm running it twice each of 4 hours and allowing 4 players to join in. People will sign up for that. I have no idea who they are or what experience they've got. It can be anyone, and that's half the fun of it.
Hmm.
And in a big game, if I'm, let's say I've got putting out a big game, I may allocate 12 places for them to sign up, but I normally keep a couple up my sleeve so I can do some walk ups.
Yeah.
Particularly, I had 2 fantastic older gentlemen that come in from out of town, from Virginia or Texas, and they played in my games every convention. And
Oh,
they saw me in
fantastic.
the corridor and they said, "Oh, we didn't see you in the program. We didn't know you were putting on a game." I said to them, "Just turn up. I'll fit you in." you know,
Oh, awesome.
so you fit in your regulars.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. That's
And they're
brilliant.
such great players. They're
Yeah.
kind, courteous, and just have such a good time every time they play.
That's great to hear. And what do you find is the motivation for people joining the games that you've run? Is it people wanting to try rules? Is it people coming back because they've had a game with you before and they've enjoyed it? Is it the period? Is there a big selection of reasons why, or is the one that sticks out?
Well, I think there's people coming back. Obviously,
Mm,
um, I think the first convention I put on, you're unknown, so
yeah.
it takes time for people to warm up. But I think people have seen some of my games and want to be a part of them, and then I think one of the unsavory aspects of it is people will sign up for a game to make sure they've got a game, and then
Right.
go window shopping and see if they want another game. If I sign up for a game, I've made a commitment. I'm going to join that game and play it, even if there's something better, some
Yeah.
shinier piece of stuff over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So that's one of the unsavory things. And they've talked about should there be a $5 fee to join a game, and that's still being discussed. It tends to be, the people who aren't happy with that are the people whose games they've left to join the other shinier game. Luckily, I've not experienced that side of things, but it does go on, and they probably need to address that.
And not trying to be negative or anything, but um, does the organizer of the game have a veto? If somebody, I'm sure it hasn't, but sometimes it does. They've had somebody who's been a bit of a pain in the backside. If you go, oh bloody hell, Derek's coming again. No, he's not joining in. Do you have
You,
kind of a veto over who plays?
no, because you don't see who's
Ah, right,
signed
okay,
up before. Um,
yeah,
I feel that I have the right to ask anyone to leave my table.
sure,
I've never had to exercise that right. I don't know how the convention would respond to that, but if they want their $35 that they gave me as a discount because I'll give them the $35. It doesn't mean that much to me. But
yeah,
it's only if someone was rude to other people or very disrespectful of the figures. If someone accidentally breaks something, you have casualties amongst
sure,
friends.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
So I have several sort of rule sets on the table to minimize damage. I think there's a lot I can do. Um, the first thing I say to people is if a flag falls off or a head falls off a figure, let me know. Because if it goes missing, I've lost the figure.
Yeah,
If I've got it in my hand, I can put it in the box and I can glue it back on when I get home. It's no issue. So that's the first thing I say. I then always have dice boxes. And I have a table rule which other people have implemented. I say, look, you can choose to roll in the die box or not. Your choice. But if you roll a dice and it lands on the edge in the die box, you can roll it again. If it rolls and lands on its edge on the terrain, your opponent gets to decide what number that dice is.
oh, that's a good one. We like that.
And
We
it's
like
up to
that.
them.
We'll keep that one. We like that one. So that's a good idea. I like that. And is there any aspect of people selling the game, not physically selling the games, but kind of promoting the games to get people to join their table? Is there Martyn's Facebook group for this? For this convention, come along and play my game, or you kind of relying on, as you say, people signing up.
I think there's sort of three levels of that. There's groups like Little Wars TV
Yeah,
and Lard America um, that they'll join. Lard America particularly joins in each other's games, and they've got their own Facebook group. And Little Wars TV are very known, and people want to play theirs game, so they're more professional on the promoting side of things. I would say then there's a sort of second tier of myself and other people who will do a playtest of our game and put pictures up. I'll do my blog post. I'll put a few pictures up on the HMGS website for the convention so people can see it. And then there's the other 70 or 80% who there's no advertising at all. It's just listed in the games with a brief 2 or 3 line description so you know what it is. And
yeah.
that's, I figure, if people know what they're signing up for, um, I've been very lucky. Some of it's luck and some of it's advertising, putting stuff out there to have full games.
I mean, do you get games that just people haven't signed up for? I mean, it's quite a sad thought, really, that somebody's put all that effort in and there's kind of an empty table and nobody turns up. But there must be games that are more popular than others, and some that don't have, all the players that they've advertised for.
Yeah, I think that sometimes some tables are light on the players, but as a general rule, most tables have players.
Oh,
And
good,
if you're putting on a
good.
four-person game and only two show up, you can have a good game.
Yeah,
So yeah, you do get some that are light, but um, I've not sensed that there's a lot of people who get no one to their table. I don't think that's a big problem.
Is there an overarching kind of organisation that tries to fit people to games if they're, or is it all down to personal choice?
It's all down to personal choice.
Oh, very
I've
interesting.
said this to the president and other people at HMGS. They need to get more into the marketing of this.
Yeah,
When you're doing internet content, we're very lucky. We've got a photogenic hobby. There's no
yes, we have. Yeah.
shortage of content. It's just they're not advertising it and promoting it using that content.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think that's one area they need to improve.
Brilliant. Well, we've mentioned the names a couple of times, and HMGS. It's a concept that we're not familiar with in the UK. Most war game shows here are run by either individuals or traditionally by clubs that would use the show to raise money to keep the club going for the year. And occasionally now we have ones that are run by manufacturers. So HMGS, what is it? How does it work?
It's a membership organization. Um, it doesn't cost. I think it's like $35 annual membership, so really very not very much. So that allows you to vote for the board members and gets you a slight discount. If you're going to all three shows, it's cheaper to be a member because you get a bit of a discount for the shows. So there's that. So I think people join it for the discount rather than join it to contribute to the organization sometimes. So, but they put on the shows, and then different clubs support the shows. So people can either submit games as part of a club. So our club is putting on 6 games at this show, or people can submit games individually.
Hmm.
They don't need to be part of a club. So it's really an overarching organisation that arranges a contract with the hotel, arranges contracts with the vendors. I'm probably selling them short on it. They do a huge amount of work,
Yeah,
and from the outside, I'm not quite on the outside. I'm starting to do more for them now. Um, there's a huge amount of work that goes into all this, and it's all a
yeah.
volunteer organisation.
If somebody, are there other conventions outside of the HMGS framework, if you like?
Oh, absolutely. HMGS is really just the East Coast, so there's other
Okay.
organisations in
Yeah.
other areas. But also within the East Coast, there's other clubs that are big enough to put on their own 1 or
Right.
2 day
Okay. Yeah.
conventions, a mini convention. There's a group called the Hawks down in Harvard de Grasse, which is south of here. I don't know exactly how far, but let's say 100 miles south of here. They put on a 2 day convention called Barrage. Give them a shout out there in the fall. There's other groups near New York who put their own things on. So, yeah, there are smaller conventions, but everyone seems to be drawn to this bigger conventions.
So, I've spoken to a few people who live in the States now, and in Canada as well, and there seems to be like a bit of a disconnect. Some people seem to live in areas where there's nobody else who games, or maybe they haven't found somebody else who games. I think more likely to be the case. And then there's some people who live in areas where they've got quite thriving clubs and wargaming shops. Is that based on population density, or is it more popular in certain areas?
I'm sure there'll be exceptions, but I think predominantly it's population based. I mean, the population in the US is very concentrated in certain areas, like the East Coast. You've got from Washington all the way up to Boston, where you've got um, even a bit further south there, you've got Atlanta, Washington, Philadelphia, New York, Boston.
Yeah.
And then you've got the whole Chicago area, which is heavy. You've got the whole Texas, Dallas, Houston, and then you've got the California area. So a lot of the probably missed out a really important population area, but those are
They'll all
some
be
of the bigger
writing in
ones.
if you have, don't worry.
Oh, I know.
Moving on from just kind of talking about the organisation of the conventions itself to a more general aspect of the games themselves. Um, so in the UK, um, I don't know if you're aware, we would have two kinds of games really. We would have what we call a demonstration game, where people would put on a big table and display the game and talk to the members of public without the members of public actually playing. Or we would have what we call a demo game where you would have one or two people running it and people joining in. So that second model sounds very much like what you are talking about in the States. Do you have that display game as well? Do you have them at shows?
Not so much at shows. I was aware that some of the American War of Independence games, they sometimes, or the Civil War games, they sometimes take to a museum and do a
Mm,
display type thing there. But at the convention, it's someone's going to point to an example where it's different, but at the conventions I go to, it seems to be 100% participation games.
okay. Yeah. I mean, there's one particular show in the UK called Hammerhead that does that. And then the remainder are a mix of demo and display games. So that then leads me into kind of the next area that I want to explore, and that is with things being a demo game. What kind of emphasis is there on um, presentation and versus game ability? So you can have an absolutely fantastic game on a piece of card 3x3 with handwritten squares on it. And you can have a really crap game on a 12x6 with the best painted figures in the world. So, what, from your sense of going to these things, what's the drive? Is it to get the best looking games, or the best playable games, or a mix of them? The mix of the two.
Well, I think a good game for a convention, my friend Lou, who's part of our club, says it's got to be fast, fun, and give a flavour of the period.
Yeah.
Those are the three things for me. There's a wide range of games. There's some games that unfortunately a little tedious to play. I've joined a couple of them. There's other ones that are good fun but not the best terrain. There's a complete range. Um, there's some experienced GMs. I'm not counting myself amongst those yet. I'd hope to be experienced eventually. But there's the wide range. I see some games where people just put down bits of masking tape or card for roads and a bit of blue felt for a river. I'm going to certainly offend people by saying I think you need to make more of an effort at a convention, but
Yeah.
some people are happy doing that and enjoy it and have players that are enjoying it. So who am I really to say they shouldn't do it? There are awards at these conventions. They're just trophies. There's no monetary award here. Actually, I think they might give you $12 to spend at the dealer hall.
Awesome.
But they do awards, and they're looking for all sorts of things. They're looking for games that are good looking. They're looking for games where people have fun or have done something different.
Yeah.
So they give what's called pels. It's French for encouragement à l'autre, to encourage the others. And then they have two other awards. They have Best of Show,
Mm.
and they have Best of Theme. For each convention, they do a theme. I think it's the American War of Independence for this one. But they give, these are the two really prestigious awards, Best of Show and Best of Theme. So that's to encourage people to go above and beyond.
From what you can see, does it make a difference then? Do people flock to those really nicely presented games? Um, or do they go for the playability? So they go to the table where everyone's laughing, or do they go to the table where everyone's going, "Ooh, that's amazing"?
I don't think they need to be two mutually exclusive categories. I think you want to have if you put as a GM, you want to put on a game that's fun but
Yeah.
also good looking. I think certain people flock to the games of the rule sets that they enjoy.
Right. Yeah.
There's the people may like, I don't know, choose your rule set,
Yeah.
and they love playing those games, and they always love playing the World War II games at night. Come on, or they'll always go to the naval games. That's what they do. Other people want to play in big games. I think they do, but you don't always know what you're going to get when you sign up, unless that GM has a history. So it's a bit of pot luck sometimes, and that's part of the charm.
Interesting. Um, Is there? Well, I've been talking to somebody in the UK about putting kind of an American style convention on, and it's got some interesting responses from
So
some of my large game friends, and I can see why, because it's something entirely new. Um, so one of the questions that came out of that, which kind of you probably got more experience of, is there an expectation of people playing in a game that they've paid to play in? Because you've paid that £35 for your convention, you've signed up. You know you're not joining a mate's game and doing it for nothing. So is there an expectation of entertainment? We're going all gladiator and so are you entertained?
Well, I think people see the $35 as a convention entrance fee. They're
Right.
getting access to the dealer hall, they're getting access to the flea market, they're getting the ability to sign up for
Mm.
multiple games. So I don't feel people are. I don't hear that people are thinking they've paid $35 to join my game. And I don't want that expectation because I want to be able to ask someone to leave the table. I hope I never ever have to,
Yeah.
but I want that ability. And if someone had paid $50 to join my game, do I really have the right to send them away from the table? Um, I'm not doing it to make money, and yeah, I don't want the expectation that they're going to have something of a certain level because no matter how well I do a game, get it running, how good my
Mm.
figures are, how good the scenery is, who's to say whether that meets their expectation? I don't want them judging on that. I just don't.
And during the course of the conversation this evening, we've spoken about rule sets a couple of times, and you've mentioned your friends saying of making it quick and enjoyable, and like the period that you're supposed to be playing. But then you've also mentioned Harpoon 5.
Yeah.
Which I think Sea. Are you familiar with the set Sea Krieg?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I don't know where it would be a missile off to see which was the most complicated between those two. Um,
Well, Harpoon 5, you've got to understand the technology outside the rules before
as
you can
well as
even
the
pick up the
rules.
rules. So I'm actually planning a game for a future convention, but just for Harpoon 5 players. And I will state that very clearly of the latest Chinese ships against the latest US ships.
Wow, awesome,
And
awesome.
I need people who know the rules. It won't
Yeah.
work otherwise.
So you've kind of answered my question there, which was around the um, do people put games on with more complex rules with the expectation that people who know them will sign up?
Rarely, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
you want
So you're going out on a limb with this harpoon one. Then.
Yeah, I really am. It could fall completely flat, but I'll have a good time. But no, I would say you're probably familiar with Pike and Shot as a rule set.
I try not to be.
Yeah,
And I got in trouble last week because somebody put a picture up and they got 600 cavalry.
yeah.
And I said that's not pike and shot, is it really? Because you've got absolutely no pike whatsoever. So it's more of a armor and trot as a set of rules. Thankfully, they took it in the jest that I was giving it, which was to be funny.
Well,
But yeah,
but
I'm aware of the set of rules. I'm not a fan of them.
yeah, but you're not a fan of them because the reason why I am a fan of them is not because they've got all the intricacies that I would want for a personal game. It's because there is a general knowledge of those rules
Yes.
in the marketplace. And for a convention where you're trying to teach people a set of rules and get people playing, I mean, I figure I want people playing. I can describe the rules for 5 minutes. I want them playing within 5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
For the next 30 minutes, I'll be answering questions. And then for the next 3.5 hours, I expect them to be able to play. And Pike and Shot allows you to do that. It's a great set of rules for a convention setting.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I'm fully aware of all the limitations of Pike and Shot, but I will defend them for a convention game. Because in the rules, you can actually have. I do tables with the figures, boom, boom, boom. There's probably 6 figures for each unit, all very clear. And then there's what's called special rules, which means you can use them to differentiate between a Spanish pike block with swordsman at the front and a Lanchneck pike block. And no one reads the special rules. You can put them down in a convention setting. No one is reading the special rules. People just want to get in and play. And a convention game, my experience of a participation game, is it is absolutely exhausting.
Mm,
It's not like running a game at the club amongst friends. You've got to make sure everyone's enjoying themselves. You've got to make sure everyone's able to play and know the rules. You've got to keep things moving. You don't want people down one end of the table waiting for people the other end of the table to complete their move.
mm.
It's absolutely exhausting, and pike and shot allows you to at least get through 4 hours and everyone have fun, and really it gives you a flavour of the period.
Yeah.
So
And do most games break down into those 4 hour slots then, or would you run a game for a day or even longer if it was big enough?
people have run a sequence of games, the first
Mm,
phase of the battle, second phase, different sessions, but that can be different people. I would say 4 hours is probably the over 80% of the games,
right.
maybe even
Okay.
higher. Because it is, I mean, I put on a game one day, a Polish game, and then with 1,000 figures, then a Bikoka the next day with 1,600 figures.
Wow.
That was crazy. I will never do that again. One game, one convention, and it's not just the physical effort of taking stuff and setting it up; it's more the mental effort.
Yeah.
It's truly exhausting, and unless you put on a participation game for 12 players, you won't realize that. And I've had people say, "Well, I could run it in the morning and then run it again in the afternoon." I always say, be sure you really want to do that.
Yeah. And if you do that and you have those blocks, do you leave do you leave the game set up if you're going to run it, say Friday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning? Would you have to set up each time?
The convention allows you to leave it set up.
Oh,
And
brilliant! That's a good
I,
one.
I was always worried that things would go missing
Mm,
if you weren't always at your table. Those concerns have been totally unfounded. Found everyone's been very respectful of the figures you've left on the table. So
yeah,
it's just
I,
not been a worry.
I have this kind of picture of people sleeping under the table with a big halberd just in case somebody comes to nick the figures overnight. But
I guess you get more relaxed. That after you've done it a few times, it ceases to be a worry. And I could probably get caught on that now, but
yeah, I mean, I've done many shows over the years, and there was a person who used to go around and help themselves to figures, who's no, but they were instantly recognisable and removed from the show very very quickly. But that's the one and only time I've ever known that.
yeah.
Um, I've had figures brushed off the table by people walking past and not realising that sort. But that's just it's every day. It's an
Yeah.
accident, and you lock them in a cellar and not feed them for a week, and everyone's friends again. So, so your rule set is very much for the convention is very much based around that ability to get people into it straight away.
Well, not always. I've actually did two games at the last convention on the same table. I did the Battle of Bilogzerksva, which is probably 1,500 Cossacks and Polish, and but the night before, that was using pike and shot, where I had probably 12 people playing. The night before, I did a battle that occurred the day before, which was more a skirmish battle,
Mm.
and I used a rule set that I absolutely love, by fire and sword.
Yeah, these a bit. I've not got them, but people who have played them, and clearly, like yourself, really, really like them.
Well, if ever you try it, I'll send you the unit sheets, because if you use the rule book, you have to find to fire, hit him this page, then go and find somewhere else the defense. So I've tabularized this all out, and I wanted to play. It's a lot more detailed set of rules. So what I did, I just did it for 4 players, much smaller scale the night before, so people who wanted to try that rule set could try it, and in a quieter, calmer thing, so we could work through some things. So I wouldn't use a complicated rule set for what I call a big game, but I do use some more complicated ones. Like I'm doing this convention. You've seen the pictures, the modern Afghanistan.
Yeah,
Great rule set, force on force, but
yeah,
not
yeah.
something I would want 20 people playing. I'm just doing it, running it twice, 4 people. Um, so I do enjoy the more nuanced rule sets, but I'd say you've got to tailor the rule set for what you're trying to achieve at the convention.
So is Fire and Sword, is that specifically for kind of Eastern European late Renaissance?
It's for a very short period in Eastern Europe, and very detailed. It's the deluge, and just before that, the Cossack uprising. Probably selling them short as well, but yeah, it's very much concentrated on the tactics and the style of fighting there.
Yeah,
Um,
I absolutely love those sort of tightly packaged rules. They really give a flavour of a period of history rather than um, you know the old 3000 BC to 1470 AD.
yeah, Wargames Research Group.
Yeah, pretty sure a few things have changed during that period of time, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's just a personal process. But I can see your reasoning behind the choice of rules. So coming on now to yourself then, and so just take us through then the process of Martyn looks in a book one day and goes, "Oh, that looks brilliant! That does. I fancy doing that as a participation game." Through to getting the figures on the table. Where do you start? Where do you go?
read a bit about it. And then get an order of battle and put that in an Excel spreadsheet. That's the first stage.
Spreadsheet. Get a spreadsheet
Spreadsheet
in.
it. And then I just start painting units. And you know, you you could always do. I'm looking at the moment, several years out, the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, absolutely huge battle in 451. Romans against Huns with everyone who was everyone turned up.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's
um,
a scrap. Come on, let's go.
and so I do the research, and I'll get into a huge amount of trouble here, but there's an author that's written some books on the Catalonian Plains,
Hmm.
and he quotes a book that was written in the time that talks about the battle, where the author where the historical stuff supports his theory. He takes that, but ignores all the other stuff. So I like to go back beyond just someone's written a book about the battle and try and research stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then I try and lay out a table. How I'm going to lay this. It's not always a long table. I've had T-shaped tables and all sorts if it suits the battle. And then I look at sometimes the what ifs, because some battles just don't make good fights unless you have some what ifs. The Battle of Bikoka is a terrible gaming battle if you don't have what ifs. The Swiss march up the table, they hit a trench that's 40 foot high, and their pikes can't even reach the top, and they get shot like ducks in a barrel.
Is that Spaniards cheating again, hiding behind
It,
things?
it is. Yes.
Yeah, that's ruined the Italian wars and lasted.
But then you look at what happens if the French had come round side, what happens if the Venetians had managed to come through the marsh. And
Yeah.
so then I'm creating a battle because I want the side that lost to have at least a 30% chance of winning in my game.
Oh, good.
Um, because you don't want people don't want to play a lost cause. They don't want to join in a game and find they know they're going to be massacred from the start, and that's it. So, there's some bending of history with what ifs to make a good scenario.
Mhm.
So that's what I do, and then it's a matter of painting units, getting ready, and then the number one thing is playtesting it, because your scenario may just not work, and then you don't want to find that out on game day at a convention.
Yeah.
So, and then I adjust the scenario, and then it's go time. Print out data sheets and everything, and I'm away.
So with the figures then, are you painting all the figures, or are you buying painted figures in, or getting figures from friends? How do you organise that?
No, I wish our club did more projects, but I think so many people have been let down in the past
Yeah,
where let's do this project, I'll paint this army, you paint that one, and they're left with a single army.
damn.
So they've been burnt too many times. So I paint all my figures. I think that also ensures some consistency in the look in the game. All my figures when I started are some of the figures up to where I am today in terms of quality. No, they're not. But and are the figures I'm painted today hopefully be where I be in a few years' time? Again, I don't know what you
Mm.
do about that. I don't want to repaint figures.
No, it's you carry on with the ones that you've got, and regardless of how you perceive how much better the newer ones are, because you always think, the turpits that I painted last week, that's the best thing I've ever done until next week.
Yeah.
And there's loads of my 28 mil Swiss pipe. That was the best thing that I did 5 years ago, or whenever I did it. So your newer units might in your mind look better, but they don't have the history. I can look at some of my units of gendarmes and regale tall tales of great deeds on the battlefield. Whereas I can go, well, the varnish on this one's a bit damp still.
Well, I had a situation where, for doing Ravina, which is a 100 figure Lanchnet pipe, a 200 figure Lanchnet pipe block, I'd already got two pipe blocks, one of Foundry Lanchnecks, and one. Then after I did that, I wanted another pipe block, and the Steel Fish Lanchnecks had come
Oh, they
out.
are nice. They are
So I
nice.
painted another 100 figure. So I've got two 100 figure pipe blocks, which are all on individual bases. So now I'm needing a 200 figure, and I'm thinking I could just combine these, but they wouldn't all be Steel Fist. So I go out and buy
Exactly.
another 100 Steel Fist figures and
Brilliant.
paint them.
Brilliant. We are. There's definitely a characteristic to monks wargamers that does that sort of thing, without a
Well,
shadow of
now
a
I'm
doubt.
struggling because Steel Fist are looking at bringing out a range of Swiss, and I've got 350 Swiss already. I
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be tempted,
No, I'm
unfortunately.
I, I'm quite looking forward to those because my Swiss are designed around Fornovo and the early parts of the wars, which is what Steel Fist are bringing out.
Yeah,
So I can always do with another spike block, I suppose, at the end of the day.
yeah. I mean,
S
you reach that point. Can you ever have enough Swiss? And I think I've got enough Swiss.
you're at that point. You're at
Yeah,
the peak level of Swissness at the moment. So, what about terrain then? Do you do all that yourself as well?
yeah, I do. I think that's an equal part of the hobby for me. It's I think that makes the table. And again, an example. I did the Battle of Ravenna, or Ravenna. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's a very simple battlefield with just a line of field defenses, and there's not much there. And I'm thinking, I ran the test game, it played very well. I'm thinking, yeah, but this doesn't. There's something missing. There's no spectacle here. I then decided to build the entire city of Ravenna. Took no part in the battle, but
Yeah,
it sat there at the end of the table. Castle walls. Got a beautiful manufacturer from Croatia who
yeah,
produced them, and
yeah. They looked amazing. They looked absolutely amazing.
yeah. But that's sort of my way. I've got to have the table looking right.
Mm.
The other one, the Bikoka. I've seen people do Bikoka, and again, I'll probably get into trouble and get emails. They've got a little wall where the Spanish standing behind. These guys came up against a 40-foot ditch with gun emplacements built. You know, if they're going to be fighting over field defenses, make the field defenses worth fighting over.
Mm.
So I built all those up, and then there's the one end of the battlefield. There's a villa of Bikoka, and I've seen someone put a small little 15 millimeter building to represent. And I wasn't going to do that. I decided again I wanted it to look the part, so I got 6 buildings from Charlie Foxtrot and kit bashed them all to make one villa, and then did the whole ornamental gardens. The actual villa and gardens took up 4 foot by 2 foot table space.
Awesome,
So,
brilliant.
so that's sort of the way I am. And then I've got to have the civilians there. I've got to have wild boar in the forest. I've got to have wood piles. It's all those other things that I think they're easy to do, and I think it just makes the look of the game.
Yeah, and I particularly like that sort of thing. And do you find that for you brings the game to life? It's not just moving toy soldiers around. You've got ducks in the pond and somebody chasing somebody around the town or whatever diorama you want to build in.
Yeah, I mean, I love one of the things I did was, well, I've got two stories. One, there was a drainage ditch at Bicocca and just putting the geese in there by some lily pads. That was a joy. And then the other one, more recently, the Battle of Bilozerksva in the Cossack uprising. I was reading this book in translating to Polish all the way up to the show, and I got within 2 weeks of the show, and I realised there was an apiary, which is loads of beehives,
Yeah,
that took an important part in the battle. And I'm 2 weeks out from the show, and I think I've got to have this. So I find 3 manufacturers who make apiaries, all in the UK. So I ordered it in the hope that one had arrived, and beekeepers as well. I managed to get all 3 delivered on time.
superb.
And so I thought, well, I've got them. I might as well put them on the table. So I was, up until the show, I was painting beekeepers and beehives.
Oh, that's the sort of detail that I really, really enjoy in those bigger games. And do you find that as you play the game over the period of a convention, or I don't know if you take it to more than one convention, that do you change how it plays based on the experience of how you've run it before?
Well, I never adjust a game because of die rolls.
Yeah,
It's if it doesn't work because it doesn't work, I'll adjust it. But that's normally done in the play test. The other thing that really strong piece of advice that I would give anyone doing a participation game: don't force your preconceived or historical outcome on the players. Let them play. They'll do some stupid stuff.
yeah,
I mean, they'll do some really stupid stuff, but they'll also um, there'll be some tactical genius as well.
yeah.
One guy in the Battle of Bicocca, he was coming in with the Venetians, not a particularly strong army. He just took them into the gardens and drew in what I was expecting. He drew in the Spanish arquebusiers just to fire and
Oh,
hold them up. The player on that side not only drew in 4 Spanish pike blocks, he drew in one of the 200-figure Landsknecht pike blocks. And then the Swiss marching up the table, when they got to the walls, there was no one there left waiting for them.
I think sometimes you see that, don't you? That a player um, will get obsessed with with a certain thing on a battlefield, and most of my gaming has been like in a multiplayer large battle, and the number of times I've looked over and gone, well. Where's that lot going? And somebody's nicked the guard or something like that just to take a duck pond that's been annoying them all day.
Yeah, and you don't want to stop it because both people in that scenario still talk about that battle in the pub and what happened.
Sure,
If I'd have said no,
exactly.
you've got to wait and receive the Swiss, that wouldn't have happened. And I also find in convention games, the better the troop that you give someone, the more they are cautious and do not want to commit it to battle. I gave someone the entire French gendarmerie, and they would not move because they would suffer a casualty. It's like they painted the figures themselves.
Oh no, no, yeah, you've got to get it scratched if it's out on the table. Yeah, but I know what you mean talking about it because people will throw units of conscripts in or units of sword and spear and shield, early Italian infantry. I'll throw that in. Not bothered about them. Throw them in, and then the unit that is going to break through, your papal guard or whatever you're going to get, they just sit there at the back going, "Well, not a lot going on today, is there really?"
I've had I've had things like the winged hussars. Someone march them on parade back and forth.
Oh no, that's the one unit um I would love to own. I don't know what I'd do with them, but I would love to own a winged hussar unit. One of the guys who's been on I think it's episode 11, Stephen Wald from Australia. He's just done a lovely unit of them. They're absolutely amazing. I don't know what he's going to do with them. Same as me, they'll probably just sit on a shelf forever. At
Yeah,
least you've
well,
gamed with them.
and the thing is, people want winged hussars, but they're very. If you look at the ratio of the the Polish cavalry in that period. There was a lot of Polish-style Cossacks and
Mm.
Pancerni. I've probably got 200 cavalry or 300 cavalry from a Polish. I only got one unit of winged hussars. You can't really have any more, unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't stop people though, it doesn't. It doesn't really stop people. So Italian Wars, and we've got to have a quick 5 minutes on the Italian Wars. What draws you to that period? I know what draws me to that period, but what draws you to it?
It's obviously the pikes.
Mm,
There's a combination of pikes and gendarmes.
yeah,
I mean, what better units other than perhaps the winged hussars? What better units other than pikes and gendarmes?
exactly, exactly.
There's nothing better. And then to put flags on those pike blocks, I, I that big pike block we're talking about and the Swiss pike blocks, I've got 15, 20 flags on the pike blocks. And you don't just put them in the front row, they're like 2/3 of the way back, like you see them in the pictures, and you just that big row of flags. Yeah, it's incredible. And then you've got the whole architecture of the Italian buildings, and then
Mm.
you've got cypress trees. That's the one thing for the Italian wars. You've got to have cypress trees lining your streets because people say that's Italy. You can just set the scene, and there's a lot of interesting battles as well.
Yeah, and I always go on about this, but until the Spanish start hiding behind things, it's quite open warfare. I mean, For Novo, I've done it as a display game and played it so many times. It's one of those that you have to tweak to get right to make it playable.
Yeah,
Otherwise, the Italians just get absolutely smashed on the fords and drown and float down the river. So you need to bring it on a bit to make it to work as a battle. It's kind of a rock paper scissors period, I think, where nothing is overpowerful and there's something that will defeat whatever it is that you've got.
yeah. I think I've not found. I've had to modify every set of rules that I've done
Mm,
it because the one like pike and shot, they really gendarmes charging pikes is just impossible in that set of rules. But they did it. Was it Marignano where
yeah,
they just got in? They kept on charging into them. So um, I think that's again what the book by Mario Trozo he describes that. It's when a pike block's not set that the cavalry can charge. They've got to have their pikes down and their foot behind the pikes. Then it's bad news for the cavalry. So you can fix a pike block and stop it moving. And to capture those subtleties, I've not really found a really good set of rules yet.
yeah. It's a fascinating period and one that looks amazing. And with those big units with the flags, you don't necessarily need to be the best painter in the world because you have that massive unit coming towards you, and it just looks brilliant. You could probably get away. I know we said earlier on in the quiz that we wouldn't have unpainted figures on the table, but you could probably get away with 10 or 20 figures in the middle of that block
Nah, you couldn't.
that are just sketch. Well, no, just sketched in with colours, and nobody'd ever know.
Neither you nor I are going to do that.
No, exactly. I mean, my little trick is I like to put people in Bradford City football kits and put them in the middle of the middle of the pipe block and see if somebody sees them. Even with the sponsorship on the chest and everything. And then halfway through a game, somebody go, Ken, is that a Bradford City kit in the middle? No, you've spotted it. Well done, well done.
Now you've given that away. Now everyone's going to be looking.
No, yeah, yeah. They'll be scouring the photographs now as we speak. So your latest project then is the modern Afghan stuff. I think you said force on force with the rules. How are you going to run that? What's that game going to be about?
Well, I did a British forward operating base, which has got
Mm,
all the HESCO bags that they use and that. The thing with modern skirmish games is the range of the weapons is essentially unlimited as far as gaming table. So you've got to have a lot of terrain. You've got to block the line of sight or provide cover. So that was the genesis of that. And then it started off as I just fancy doing a small project for Cold Wars, and then it just
Well,
grew, and I kept on adding more and more stuff. Well,
yeah,
I need that, I need that. And then stuff didn't arrive, and I had stuff to paint, so I'd got a drone kit, a big Reaper drone.
yeah,
So I thought, I've got a weekend free. We could fit that into the game, and it's just sort of grown, and it's allowed me to spend a bit of time on the buildings and the
mm,
terrain, which I've enjoyed. And then the other thing that's important there for me is the civilians. And there's some rules: if the shot fires within 2 inches of a civilian in the line of shot, then
mm,
there's potential of casualties. So it's getting both players to think about that, and not just, you can't always shoot just because you can see. So it's sort of intrigued me, and I tried a number of rule sets, and this one's just sort of stuck and captured, because it
mm,
allows, if a unit's moving, you to interrupt their movement or firing to suppress them, and it's really a very good set of rules, but you've got
mm.
to take your time with it.
Yeah, the pictures that you've put up on Facebook, it's an amazing setup, and you've obviously spent a lot of time on it. And we've kind of gone over this a little bit in the past, but there's lots of little vignettes in there. There's I mean, I was looking at like posters on the side of the walls of the buildings and stuff. It's important to you, is it, to bring it to, in inverted commas, to life?
Yeah, I see so many Iraq games and Afghan modern games
Mm,
that just, the entire board is sand colored. And then you look at photos of an Afghan village or an Afghan town, and it's just color. And I wanted to try and capture some of that. So I very much try and look at photos of stuff.
mm.
When I was doing the Italian Wars, looking at photos of the Italian countryside, just to see what I've missed. And yeah, I'm just trying to capture the feel. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's what I try and do.
Yeah, there are people I've heard of who go on holiday to Italy to check the game table that they're playing on is correct, in terms of that sort of detail. So I
Yeah.
don't know any, I don't know who it is, but
You got a trip to Pavia arranged, I guess.
yeah, well, we've kind of we normally go to Italy every couple of years, to be fair. And with my Garibaldi project, I was going to go to Mentana, which is just east of Rome. It's not that far out. But yeah, Pavia and those sorts of places definitely need a reconnaissance. I
Yeah.
think
Well,
is
you
definitely the
can't
right word.
persuade me that a trip to Bicocca's worthwhile, because that's all built up now. So.
Oh, is it gone? Is it gone? Well, I was talking to Simon Miller, who's just done the fourth book in the Italian War series on Kerasol. Could be the right
Okay.
pronunciation. I've no idea. And he says that all that now is basically the Italian version of Lidl.
Uh,
So it's a bit of a shame, really, that all that's been built over.
yeah, I actually use Google Maps quite a lot when devising games as well.
Yeah,
That's a useful tool.
I've used them for our World War One Palestine games, not Palestine, World War One Mesopotamia games, and you can still see like the ghost of some of the trench lines in some of the places,
Wow.
because it's just middle of the desert near either Tigris or Euphrates, with and nobody's there anymore. So
Yeah.
it's just there. So how long does it take you to get yourself into a position where you are on the table with something, and are you, have you got little germs of ideas floating around your head that might come to fruition in 3 or 4 years' time?
Well, everything I buy, I paint at some
Mm,
point. I don't. I'm not. I've got three projects that are coming up. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains, but I don't want to do that short. It's such a big battle and such an important battle. I want at least 2,000, but in my mind, I'm thinking 4,000 figures.
brilliant.
So that's, I've got some units that I can play a small game with, but I don't want to rush that project.
Mm,
Um, I really want to, and I've started this, but just got interrupted by Cold Wars. You've probably seen my Saxons.
yes,
I've
yeah.
always wanted a Napoleonic army. I played with Airfix, Napoleonics, and I've never been able to achieve that. So this year I promised myself to get at least a Saxon division done. And that's for me. It's not necessarily for a convention game. You'll probably end up as a convention game, but that's one thing I want to do. I'm into Harpoon 5 as I talked for a game there. Um, what else is going on? I've got a whole Ottoman army from the assault group that they were having a
Wow.
Christmas sale. So that's 800 figures Ottoman army. That will go against the Italian war stuff. I could do a whole what if there, Venetian battles. And I'm sure I've got something else. But normally, half the joy is piecing together the army and buying the army. So I normally get them, base them, prime them, so then they're ready for me to
Yeah.
sort
So
out.
you've been
Oh,
back in the hobby and doing stuff now 6 or 7 years, haven't you?
yeah,
Has
yeah.
there been a project that just hasn't made it? Have you started it and it's gone brr, run
Well,
out of steam?
that would be the other one I'm doing is a micro armor project, the big
Oh yes, yeah, yeah,
warpack one.
yeah.
But the only project that sputtered was due to my lack of painting skills. Was that Saxon project, and it was never intended that it would completely sputter out. I wanted to get back to it, and now I am back to it. Now, are they the best white uniforms ever? No, but I can live with the standard they are. But painting white uniforms with white sashes,
It's not
it's
easy.
it's not easy.
It's not.
And yeah, when I started back into the hobby, that as a first unit to paint probably wasn't the best choice. And going to Landsknechts as my next
Yeah,
attempt
you've
probably
not gone
wasn't the
down the
next.
easy route, have you?
But yeah, everything I bought, I will paint. I've also got some 40mm Napoleonics that I want to paint at some point.
Yeah,
But once I get into, I'm planning for a convention, then it becomes everything is that until the convention. So I've got through the Afghanistan stuff now. I'm now going straight back to Napoleonics and probably giving myself a week's break before the con, and then as soon as the con's over, it's going to be painting Napoleonics.
yeah. Do you find yourself quite disciplined in that way? It sounds like you are. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
get into project. I mean, I have to say that I am to a reasonable. I have very few failed projects. There was the 10 mil Malburian that never happened that I've just started up again now. But yeah, I tend to stick with stuff, and once I get to 1,000 figures, that's when I start to stall. When I've got enough for a big game, it's like, what do I need next? And then my eye flutters somewhere else. But such is a war game in life.
Well, the other one I'm thinking of is I built the castle for Ravenna. Um,
Yes, that's just amazing.
there's
Amazing.
got to be. I'm thinking the Crusades could be
Yeah,
repurposed that castle
yeah,
because it's too much work went into it for it to be a single game terrain
yeah,
piece. So I
yeah.
do repurpose stuff for other battles.
Brilliant. Well, that would be fantastic to see in the future. I'd like to thank you very much for your time this evening. Great to get back into podcasting again. Lovely to speak to you as well. Is there a question you've got for me at the end? I
Um,
occasionally get one.
yeah, I was going to ask, what's your view on plastic figures versus metal figures?
Ooh, controversial. Um, it's a good question. I could go for hours. No, um, I haven't. I have over recent years got into kind of using the plastic figures for the hoi polloi, the the bulk figures. So if you look at one of my pipe blocks, Italian Wars pipe blocks, about 50 to 60% of them will be plastic Perry's miniatures, and of course they only do upright pikes, so they're all at the back, and then I've bought metal at the front to kind
Right.
of beef it all up. And I've used a lot of plastic figures for the Garibaldi project, American Civil War Perry stuff as well, just to bulk out numbers really, because it is. As I explained earlier on, I think you're the same. You've got a reasonable amount of disposable income for the hobby, but it can go a lot further if you dip into the plastics as well.
Yeah.
But then when you take into account your time putting together the plastic figures, sometimes I just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that where you go, oh, no,
I,
metal?
yeah. I don't go into plastics because I see all the work assembling them. And it's like
Yeah.
3D printing. People say you can save money getting into 3D printing.
Mm,
And I'm sort of saying, but does it help me get more figures? Because metals, all I've got to do is place an order. It's a 5 minute
yeah.
job. If I've got to 3D print it, all that's doing is cutting into my painting time.
And to me, it's an additional hobby. I've got friends who are into the 3D printing, and I come from an engineering background as well. So it's not, I'm not afraid of the tech. I just can't be bothered to,
Yeah.
in my mid 50s, I just can't be bothered to have another hobby. I'll pay Alan and Michael Perry to cast me figures. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
I'm like you. I come from an engineering background as well,
Mm,
and I'm confident I could 3D print if I wanted to. I just
yeah,
don't want to.
yeah. It's another hobby that we old people don't want.
Mind you, I will say about 3D printing, going onto Etsy and
Yeah,
buying buildings that people have 3D printed is a
yeah.
really convenient thing to do.
Yeah, I'm toying with doing Narvik with the 1700 ships that I've got, so I will need quite a lot of 1700 buildings. So 3D printing will be the way that I'll go with that. I've no idea what a house looks like in Narvik. I've watched a couple of Narvik films on Netflix recently. That's my research for that project. Well, thank you once again, Martin. I'm sure we'll keep in touch via Facebook and hopefully meet up if you come over to the UK. Thanks for your time, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy listening to you talking about putting a big game on. So, thanks very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll say good night to everyone.
Good night.
Wow, 2.5 hours. I didn't quite realise it was that long. I thought before I put this together that this was going to be a really short episode because the time speaking to Martin passed quite quickly. Um, and obviously, we just had a really good time and enjoyed chatting with each other about our mutual joy of the Italian wars and big games. And I hope that came across in the interview. I hope you enjoyed it listening to as much as I did putting it together. So check out Martin's website, College of Kings. I'll put a link to it in the show notes and keep an eye out for his stuff if you are visiting conventions in the United States. Thank you, Martin. Thanks once again for coming on the show and bursting the podcast into life again, which is brilliant. That just leaves me to say that I hope to be back in a couple of weeks' time, and my guest for episode 40 will be another one of my friends from north of Nottingham, and it's going to be a chap called Steve Shan, and I've known Steve for a very long time since I first came to Leeds, and Steve is an author. He's done books about the Franco-Prussian War. He's done scenario books for World War II and Napoleonics, a wide breadth of history that he's interested in. He's also a painter, a professional painter. So there's lots of things that you can imagine I enjoy my painting. So there'll be lots of things for me and Steve to talk about in terms of technique, etc. And we can give you an insight into the life of a professional painter. So I hope you're going to enjoy that episode as much as you've enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed having the Yorkshire Gamer podcast in the background if you're driving to and from work. I know some of you do listen to it then when you're commuting, or whether you're using this as a bit of a background for when you're painting. I'm so glad that you are on board and listening to these podcasts. Tell your friends all about them. Get yourself subscribed on Podbean or on YouTube if you listen on the YouTube channel. It's great to have you on board, and the enthusiasm that you bring to me from your comments for these podcasts drives me on to do more. And I thank you for it. So until next time, City.